Chapter 49-24. Only Gu Leng was left in Jian Wushuang's eyes, looking at him with a smile. Only as long as you don't kill me, I promise you will never do anything against you from now on. Gong Ziyu has completely abandoned the arrogant belonging to the emperor, and almost begged. I am the third brother of Gong Ziyan. He is my emperor brother. He will definitely not let you move me. When he said this, he even began to shamelessly call out the name of Xiao Dijuan. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not affiliated with Xiaodajan at all, and even their relationship was equal. Wanting to use Xiaodajan to suppress him is no different from idiotic dreams. Young Master Yu pulled his throat and called out Xiao Dijuan's name loudly. But then, Jian Wushuang pointed like a knife and cut off his entire left arm with a palm. Divine blood spurted out. The fairy body shattered. Gong Ziyu's screams resounded, clutching his broken arm and staggering back. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, and he had no intention of letting him go. If it weren't for the appearance of the true shadow of the emperor, then Sung Yuzhong would definitely be able to kill Jian Wushuang. It is precisely because of this that he gave birth to a murderous heart. In this unending situation, once young Master Ziyu is released, then I am afraid Jian Wushuang will be extremely passive in the future. So Gong Ziyu must die. At this moment, he didn't even consider the existence of Zhen Wuyang and Heavenly Court. The palm that was surging with scarlet power fell again, and Gong Ziyu's right leg was directly cut off, and the blood spurted out. Without the support of one leg, Gong Ziyu suddenly sat in the chaotic void, looking at Jian Wushuang with a gray face. He had seen the decisive killing intent from Jian Wushuang Sen's cold eyes, and there was no room for recovery. Gong Ziyu had regretted it to the extreme. He shouldn't have made the idea of cleaning the battlefield and capturing Xiaodajan alive. Without this idea, it would not end up in this situation. Don't kill me, I don't want to die. I can give you whatever you want. The sun's feathers are like ashes. Emperor's luck, Emperor's luck. I will use the Emperor's luck to replace my life, can't it? Jian Wushuang was too lazy to listen to him anymore, and the killing aura in his hand was so strong that it turned into a long and narrow blood blade. In the next moment, he raised the blood blade in his hand and cut it down without any hesitation. The young man's eyes are about to split, his face is like ashes. However, the blood blade was not cut down, as if it had been hindered, hovering over his head. Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked behind him. Di Qing had already come to him, casting a spell to stop his movement. Di Qing placed his palm on Jian Wushuang's shoulder and patted gently, and then whispered, "Leave it to me to do it," he said, and then walked slowly to young Master Yu, who was shaking like chaff. Gong Ziyu rumming amnesty. Save me, I can give you all the luck of the emperor." The one who responded to him was Jin Yu, who was extremely sharp. Each golden feather is enough to break the heavens and penetrate any super-universe. Thousands of golden feathers passed through, directly shooting Gong Ziyu's fairy body into powder, and even Xianyuan was completely crushed. The third emperor under the seat of Zhen Wuyang, Gong Ziyu, died. Void wailing. All the luck belonging to the emperor returned to the universe, and could no longer be collected. Seeing this scene, Xiao Dijuan's figure was shocked, and he slowly backed up a few steps. If he hadn't been dragged by the thin purple robe, he would collapse. Gong Ziyu died in front of his eyes. Various emotions changed in his eyes, and finally closed his eyes tightly. The magnificent and majestic 10-pointed wings slowly moved behind Di Qing, reflecting the chaos and void. Under the random blow of rank 9 Dian Immortal, even the emperor was easily destroyed. The invincible Sun Yu fell completely. Putting away the way of killing, Jian Wushuang has recovered his calmness. He looked at Di Qing and slowly said, "Why do you want to do this?" Putting away the 10 wings, Di Qing calmly said, "Because he is the emperor of Zhen Wuyang. Once you behead him, you will definitely suffer Zhen Wuyang's revenge, and you will never survive from him." Having said this, he paused and said, "I am different. Even if he shoots me, I can protect myself." Jian Wushuang was moved in his heart, and he understood that the reason why Di Qing did this was to protect him. Immediately he solemnly said, "Thank you. I owe you once. Between you and me, there is no need to say thank you. Diqing raised his eyebrows and smiled, and then said, "It's just that next I'm afraid I will be away for a while." Just when Jian Wushuang was about to ask him where he was going, an unspeakable aura of grandeur quietly enveloped the entire void battlefield. That kind of breath was magnificent to the extreme. Wherever that breath was shrouded, the years stopped passing and were completely sealed. The broken heaven was reshaped, and the chaotic void was quickly repaired. Jian Wushuang, who was completely unable to move half a minute, his eyes widened, and he looked forward in disbelief. Everything is going back. What kind of existential power should be able to complete the retrospective? The luck and aura that had originally dissipated began to condense like stars. Soon, under the condensing of the stars and streamers, a figure that could not be more familiar appeared again. The dead Sun Yu, who had been killed by Diqing and was irreversible, was actually reborn. At the same time, the chaotic void was torn apart, and a series of figures that were so powerful that they were indescribable appeared from the end of the void. They all carry various colored wheels of light on their backs, and it is hoped that the ancient heavens will circulate in them. Only rank 6 Dayan Immortal can condense the light wheel, and they are all the veteran Dayan Immortal under the seat of Zhen Wuyang. For each one, the minimum is 9 turns. Even the newly born Tao of Heaven crawls under their feet. And at the front of these elders, Dayan Immortal was a figure with a tired complexion and no aura. Although he was extremely ordinary, Yu read www.akanshu.com but let all the elders behind him surrender. All the violent power, aura, and even the heavens on the void battlefield can't get close to him. Lord of Heaven, Emperor Zhen Wuyang is here. Jian Wushuang felt that the blood in the meridians was solidified, and in front of that kind of breath, he couldn't even breathe. Coming to the battlefield of the void, Emperor Zhen Wuyang looked tired, but still carried the supreme authority. Seeing Gong Ziyu, who opened his eyes and looked confused, his expression was extremely blue. Emperor Father, am I still alive? Gong Ziyu, who had recovered from the confusion, was extremely excited when he saw Zhen Wuyang's presence. However, what awaited him was not a concerned inquiry, but a heavy slap. The emperor was angry and directly drove him far away. Chapter 49-25. Not long after reshaping the immortal body, the young Master Yu, who was in the weakest state, had his 7 orifices gushing with blood, and was almost killed by this slap again. Then, Zhen Wuyang stretched out his hand again, and shook him directly back in front of him. Covering the divine blood pouring out of his nose with his hand, the Sun Yu said timidly, "The Emperor, why do you want to beat the child?" Taking a deep breath, Zhen Wuyang pointed to the entire broken void and said in a deep voice, "Did you do it here?" Hearing this, he suddenly fainted a little. "Yes, it's not just me." When Zhen Wuyang heard this, he anxiously wanted to pump him a few more times, but eventually he retracted his palm. The magnificent and terrifying aura on the void battlefield disappeared. Jian Wushuang and others panted, and then all backed away. The breath that Zhen Wuyang dropped was too vast. Even Diqing, who was the 9-ranked Great Yin Immortal, had no way to compete, let alone them. Jian Wushuang's temples were sweating like syrup, and if Zhen Wuyang were to kill him in pain, he would never escape. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuyang slowly swept over them, and after staying on Jian Wushuang and Diqing for a while, he quickly looked at Zai Audiobook again. "Yenner, tell me what's going on," he said solemnly. "The whole void is broken into this way. It's not just a battle." Little Emperor did not hesitate when he heard the words. Dang even told Zhen Wuyang what had happened. This war involving more than 1,000 Yangtzeans was the most massive battle ever since Zhen Wuyang Emperor opened up the Great Division domain. The complexity of the forces involved and the wide spread of immortals are cut off from the past and the present, so that when Xiao Dijuan recounted such a scene of a tragic war, Zhen Wuyang, including the patriarchs behind him, was shocked. An immortal is an existence of absolute status in the ordinary universe. They transcend the way of heaven, beyond the shackles of 99%. Even if you look at Dayanhuan, they are all absolute existences. But at the moment, they died in batches in the void battlefield. Just because of this inexplicable battle, when Zhen Wuyang and a group of elders, De Yanxian, heard about the equal forces on both sides, they were truly shocked. With less than 200 Yinxian, he resisted the attack of nearly 2,000 Yinxian and 3 Dianxian, and completely saved the Six-Day Realm. How can that be? 120 can still keep the Six-Day Realm? At the end, Xiao Dijuan looked at Jian Wushuang and Diqing and said, if it weren't for their help, the Six-Day Realm would have been destroyed, and even I would have fallen into this melee. So he's it. He pointed angrily at young Master Yu, who was kneeling in front of Zhen Wuyang. Gong Ziyu suddenly sat in the void and waved his hands repeatedly. No, not just me. This matter has nothing to do with me. Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath. The Dihui emanating from his body couldn't help but fluctuate. This is really horrible. And such a fierce battle erupted in just a short time after he left the Six-Day Realm. This battle, if it were placed in any position of the Great Division region without being prevented, would be extremely terrifying destruction. Fortunately, this war has completely subsided. Zhen Wuyang's eyes were as sinking as water, and he almost swallowed young Master Han Yu. No, the Emperor, it has nothing to do with me at this time. It has nothing to do with me. He kept backing away, with horror in his eyes. But Zhen Wuyang didn't start pumping him again, but said in a deep voice, you can never mobilize so many immortals. Now tell me who else is besides you. Hearing this, Gong Ziyu had hesitation and struggle in his eyes, as if he wanted to keep this secret. But the struggle and hesitation in his heart only existed for a moment, and then he said, going back to the Emperor, it's the second brother, and the sixth brother. Hearing this sentence, Zhen Wuyang was furious. Okay. You three have such bold guts to mobilize so many immortals to kill the elder brother. Now killing my brother, is it going to kill the Emperor in the future? His face was gloomy and terrible, and he was obviously really angry. When the Sun Yu heard this, he immediately trembled as sifting chaff. The Emperor, it is definitely not what you think. There is a reason for all of this. Forcibly resisting the anger rising from the bottom of his heart, Zhen Wuyang gave him a disappointed look. From now on, you will stay for a full year. The mantra of the Emperor, the way of heaven, was established, and countless ways of the Emperor in heaven were born directly at this moment. A series of mysterious dense patterns flowed in the void, and each of them represented the Emperor's way of heaven. The entire emptiness was shrouded by Dihui, and the emperors and lords descended. Gong Ziyu was so frightened that he couldn't add to it. Having been banned for a year, that is simply unimaginable. A Huanyan represents that even the celestial plane constructed by heavenly Tao will be extinguished, turning into star fragments and disappearing into the boundless void. One Huanyan represents that a monk is enough to grow to the terrifying point of becoming an immortal. One Huanyan almost represents infinite years, and it is the alternate node of the newly born Tiandao instead of the old one. Gong Ziyu was imprisoned for a full year, which was the most severe punishment. No, not the Emperor. Everything is the son of the sun, who made me do this. I am innocent. Gong Ziyu shouted in despair, but the Emperor's heavenly way had already come down, like chains, instantly imprisoning him. Then, the void collapsed to reveal an unknown space, and Emperor Tiandao directly dragged young Master Yu into it and sealed it up. The void was wiped out, and the singularity that belonged to the Emperor's heavenly path was slowly moving. In that unknown space, the third son of the Emperor, Ziyu, was sealed and banned for a full year. The void was silent. All the elders Dianxian shook their heads and sighed, then cast their eyes on Jian Wushuang and Diqing. Soon the elder Dianxian recognized Diqing, who was beside Jian Wushuang. Why, how could be him? That ancestral golden crow? Didn't he already die at that time? All the elders Dianxian began to whisper together. At this time, Emperor Zhen Wuyang noticed Diqing. Talk about it, why are you here? Invisibly, the Emperor's prestige came down, pressing all the immortals to be a little unable to support it. Diqing secretly gritted his teeth. He was fully fighting against the coercion of the Emperor. At this time, the little Emperor stepped forward and stood in front of Jian Wushuang and Diqing, and said loudly, if it weren't for their full resistance, I'm afraid that the Lutian realm, and I would have died in the void. Father, you can ask me anything you want. and I will answer them for them. Zhen Wuyang wanted to speak again. He also knew that this battle was too tragic and involved too many forces, and it was precisely the entire six-day realm that was a complete victim. Chapter 49-26. Without the existence of Jian Wushuang, Diqing and others, facing the Yanxian army, there is only one way to destroy the six-day realm. Therefore, Zhen Wuyang did not feel embarrassed at this time. The battle to destroy the six-day realm was a premeditated war. If it is not investigated, it may leave the source of disaster. After a moment of contemplation, Zhen Wuyang spoke again. Gong Ziyu, who of you killed it? Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he heard this. As Diqing said, Zhen Wuyang would really get to the bottom. Just when Xiao Dijuan was about to speak, Jian Wushuang took a step ahead of him and said calmly, I killed him. All the elder Dianxian turned their eyes to him, as if they had some regrets in their eyes. Diqing was startled slightly, then turned to look at Jian Wushuang, and various emotions flashed in his eyes. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuyang said solemnly, Then you know, what is the crime of beheading the emperor? Emperor Majesty put pressure on him. He gritted his teeth and resisted not letting himself fall. I only know that if you don't kill him, I will be in danger. The long sword was in the air. A sword smashed away the emperor's coercion, and blocking Jian Wushuang's body. The little emperor raised the long sword in his hand and pointed it straight at Zhen Wuyang. Little emperor, put down your sword. All the elders Dianxian stepped forward to put pressure on the little emperor at this moment. But he was still unmoved, holding up the true sword in his hand, pointed at Zhen Wuyang with the tip of the sword, and did not give in a step. Do you dare to do it to me? Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice. At this moment Di Hui shined to the extreme. Under Emperor Hui, Chen Qing and the others all snorted, and involuntarily a ray of divine blood came out from the corner of their mouth. The extremely weak little monarch retreated a few steps. His ears and nose bleed out of blood. But he blocked Jian Wushuang again, raised his true sword, and aimed at Zhen Wuyang again. Then he said in a hoarse voice, Why not dare? A touch of disappointment flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes, and then he casually raised his hand, and heaven put pressure on it. The real sword in Xiaodijan's hand broke into hundreds of pieces at the sound, and his figure was directly suppressed by the emperor's heaven. Let go of me, Zhen Wuyang, he roared, but there was no way to break free of this restraint. Facing the little emperor directly calling the emperor's name, Zhen Wuyang didn't care, but instead turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. Really you? At this time, a lazy voice resounded abruptly in the void, and Diqing walked to the front of Zhong Yanxian. Hey, look at me. I can kill the emperor unscrupulously, in this entire big division, apart from me. I am afraid there is no second immortal. After saying this sentence, Diqing resolutely burst out the wings of 10 directions. In an instant, the magnificent power that belonged to the Nineth rank Great Yanxian swayed in the void. The magnificent 10-party wings are blooming, and the clear ancestral veins are also stretched for thousands of miles at this moment. Ha! The golden crow treasure screamed, the sacred magnificence to the extreme. Diqing is actively fighting Zhen Wuyang. Even though he is the 9th-ranked Dian immortal, facing the emperor, he is not even worth mentioning. Just a wisp of emperor's luck can easily kill any Dian immortal. Even Diqing is no exception. If you want to describe the distance between them, it would be Machin and Haoyue, even more incomparable. But it was such a grandiose and proud truth that Zhen Wuyang didn't even mention the slightest interest in fighting. He just looked at Diqing with some interested eyes. Golden Crow, you never seem to be afraid of me? Diqing smiled slightly and looked directly at Zhen Wuyang Dao. To be honest with you, even if you become the emperor, I was really not afraid at the beginning. Even now I am not afraid, because I am afraid that it will not solve any problems. So we removed such an unstable factor from the blood. Are you really afraid of me? Zhen Wuyang narrowed his eyes slightly. Diqing's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. The atmosphere was deadly silent. For the first time, Dian Immortal dared to confront the emperor. In the eyes of those elders, Dian Immortal was an extremely strange scene. Zhen Wuyang has fought and killed all his life, and he has killed several emperors before opening up the current big division domain. But now, facing this guy who could just be crushed to death, he didn't rush to do it. Sure enough, your Xinqing is still the same as before. As the Golden Crow ancestral vein, you are rumored to have 9 true fate. I'm afraid this is the reason why you dare to confront me. Zhen Wuyang Emperor Yi said, "What if I destroy your 9 true lives now?" Di Qing heard this, and his heart tightened slightly. He had hidden the deepest trump card, but he didn't expect Zhen Wuyang to know it. He now has only 7 true lives left. If Zhen Wuyang is determined to condemn him, I am afraid that he will fall completely today. Thinking of this, Di Qing gritted his teeth and said nothing. But Zhen Wuyang didn't seem to want to know Di Qing's answer either. He directly stretched out his index finger in the void. In an instant, all the general trends that Di Qing had built were like a mirror flower, directly broken. Di Qing's mouth was full of blood, and his eyes widened to the maximum. Zhen Wuyang looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Beheading the emperor is a capital crime for you. But if you have other unavoidable ideas, this emperor will save you from death. But immediately, I will exile you to the borderless sea for 1 year." As soon as the emperor's mantra came out, the way of heaven appeared. Layers of chains then bound Di Qing. After Di Qing heard the penalty, his expression changed drastically. "A Chinese year. Do you plan to let this seat be completely lost in it?" But he only left this sentence, and his body completely disappeared into the void. Jian Wushuang got up and pursued, but in the end he couldn't catch it. Exile from the endless sea. In just 6 words, it contains endless horror and coldness. Chang Duoling, who killed 9 heavens with his own power, was once exiled to the sea of no edge. But he didn't know how to escape, and he was extremely cautious about the endless sea. Where the unknown lies, is probably the real purgatory. Gong Ziyu was imprisoned for a full year, and Di Qing was banished from the sea of endless. Everything seems to be just the beginning. Zhen Wuyang slowly swept across the only remaining Yin Xian on the void battlefield, and finally stopped his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang also did not evade, even looking at him coldly. For some reason, Zhen Wuyang felt a very familiar and unfamiliar feeling when he stared at that pair of eyes. At the same time, there is a real feeling of sitting on an equal footing. This surprised Zhen Wuyang's heart. Why would such a small Yinxian give him such a feeling? An existence that does not even belong to a realm has already made Zhen Wuyang vigilant at this moment. That kind of vigilance is unprecedented for Zhen Wuyang. Chapter 49-27. Even in the age of reverence, the age of the emperor traversing the ages, there are very few existences that can make him directly feel threatened. This is simply absurd. Zhen Wuyang directly discarded the absurdity that had arisen in his heart and returned to normal. At the same time, he was a little puzzled. What exactly is the familiar feeling that Jian Wushuang exudes? Why is it familiar? After thinking about it for a while, Zhen Wuyang didn't intend to find out. He only came to see you and noticed the abnormal fluctuations here, so he rushed over. Now that the crisis of the 6-day realm has been lifted, he has to return to the heavens to deal with some hidden dangers. Reaching out his hand to dissipate the emperor heavenly Tao that had bound the little emperor, Zhen Wuyang wanted to say nothing, and finally did not say anything, leading a group of elder Dianxian to leave. The originally shattered and chaotic void was repaired by the emperor heavenly Tao again, and there was no trace of the trauma of the war, and it was as clean as if nothing had happened. Even the universe that was affected and destroyed was reshaped, but the billions of creatures in it eventually disappeared. Seeing this clean void flowing with the galaxy, Chen Qing and others were a little lost. Here a tragic battle took place. Nearly 2,000 fairy gods and 3 of them were buried here. But at this moment, they all disappeared without a trace. With a light cough, Xiao Dijuan slowly came to Jian Wushuang. His eyes dimmed and said, "I'm sorry." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "It's not to blame you, the matter is here. What I want to think about is how to make up for it. Brother Sword, what are your plans? No matter what, I, Qin Qing, will be the first to follow you." Walking out from behind, the Qin Qing Ning said, his eyes firm. "I still have a copy. Fengshan will never back down." Fengshan, who is taller than Qin Qing's figure, said, patting his chest. Then, Chuanxiu Chuijing and Wei Liujia also took a step forward at this moment. In addition to firmness, their faces were more determined. However, hesitation flashed in Zhao Ting's eyes, and in the end he did not take a step forward but stayed in place. Reluctantly smiled, Jian Wushuang turned to look at them and said, "What are you doing? The war is over, and there is no fighting. Go back and take care of it." "Brother Sword, is there really nothing to do?" Chen Qing asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Of course not. Now your top priority is to recover from your injury, so as not to leave a hidden illness." The war finally ended completely, and nearly 2,000 Yangtzeans were buried in the void battlefield. The six-day realm was finally preserved, but the foundation was completely destroyed, and only 1,000 people were left to repair. The young Master Qian who came to the aid was also badly injured, and now only 3 of the 100 immortals he brought were left. But instead of lamenting, he was extremely excited. With more than 200 Yanxian fighting against more than 2,000 Yanxian, and finally defending the six-day realm, this is an impossible battle, but it actually happened in the end. The reason why Gong Ziqian was excited was because he saw the hidden secrets of the six-day realm. His desperate bet this time is a right bet. Getting the bet right means that from now on, no longer need to look at the face of Gong Zijia. His ethereal Xianzhou will be temporarily safe. However, Gong Ziqian is still a little worried at the moment. The six-day realm has now declined, and whether the ethereal Xianzhou can be taken into account in the future is still unknown. Thinking of this, he still regrets it. If he comes a few days late, it would be nice not to catch up with this war. At the end of the war, the top repairers who had been sent far away returned to the six-day realm one after another. Every top repairer, after going through such a big battle, completely transformed into a long one. If you want to survive such a fierce battle, only if you become stronger can you have a chance. The realm of Yanxian is the ultimate goal they are determined to pursue. After 6 days it returned to silence, still cold. Sitting on the roof of the reconstructed Tiangong, Jian Wushuang was sitting with his eyes closed. In this tragic battle, he gained his strongest sword intent, and his own swordsmanship has reached the stage of perfection. Once Wushuang Kendo is fully integrated, Jian Wushuang will enter the realm of Sword Fairy. By then, I am afraid that he will be enough to fight the 9 turns Yanxian. Jian Wushuang, who had obtained his strongest sword intent, was not happy at the moment. He even sat on the eaves of the heavenly palace without any expression. Countless terrifying power surged around him, and at the same time he quickly swallowed a few Emperor Pin pills. He is recovering to the peak with all his strength, and even trying to break through. The whole generation of Xiao Gudian's birth was gathering towards him, and the heavens and the earth changed. I don't know how long it took. When Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes, he couldn't help showing a sense of loss in his eyes. Could it be that there is no way to be promoted to Dian Immortal? Jian Wushuang was indeed attacking Dian Immortal, but he ultimately failed. The failure this time was far more terrifying than any previous failure to break through, because this time, the situation is completely different. As an ultra-perfect chaotic creature, his road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, and once the breakthrough is successful, he will completely crush enemies of the same level. Although the road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, it is not without road. If you describe every realm as a misty unknown cloud, although it is impossible to achieve, there is still a way to be understood. But Jian Wushuang now felt that his realm could no longer make a breakthrough, because his realm forward has completely reached the end. After becoming a fairy, there is no realm to break through. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from Jian Wushuang's temples. He didn't expect that his path of promotion would stop in the realm of evolving immortals. As for the realm of day evolving above immortals, he had no perception at all. There was a bit of bitterness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and he also knew the reason. He came from the universe of divine power, and did not belong to Dianhuan's cultivation system at all, even though he cut off the past of Hongqian and gained power. But after all, Xianyuan could not be born, and without Xianyuan, it means that he will never be able to be promoted to Dian Immortal. There must be other ways. This is definitely not my end. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of muddy breath, Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became firmer. Since there is no path in front of you, then abruptly blaze a trail. If the road can't even be opened up, it doesn't hurt to ruin the mountain in front of you. However, in the next plan, I am afraid he will be extremely passive. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to break through the realm of Yanxian with all his strength during this time and reach Dianxian, but everything failed. Chapter 49-28. The realm of Dian Fairyland. He was temporarily out of reach. But this is about his decision to go to the borderless sea. Originally, he planned to break through the realm of Dian Immortal and go to the Sea of Wordlessness to find the truth, which would have some chances of winning. But now, everything is full of unknowns. However, even so, Jian Wushuang had already made the decision to go to the borderless sea. Diqing was banished because he was exiled, and bringing him out of it was something he had to do. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang left his depressed mood behind him and left Xiao Gudian in a flash. In front of Dega Tiantian Palace, Jian Wushuang had quietly arrived, and he quickly entered the temple under the clouds. The thin purple robe seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, he directly greeted him and said, "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." Jian Wushuang heard the words and frowned slightly. I only asked him about one thing. "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." The thin purple robe still stood in front of him, obviously not planning to let him in. "I'm afraid he's not sick at all." Jian Wushuang looked straight at the thin purple robe and said, "He doesn't want to see me." The thin purple robe dodged his eyes slightly and then said slowly, "Master Sword, in fact, His Highness does not want you to go there." He didn't finish his words and was interrupted by the little emperor, who walked out from the depths of the heavenly palace. "My buddy, you go down." The thin purple robe agreed and then stepped back. "Come in and sit. I don't want to see you," Xiaodigen said quietly. Jian Wushuang didn't care either. He urgently needed to know how to get to the borderless sea. How to get to the borderless sea? He walked forward quickly and asked straightforwardly. Xiao Dijuan didn't look back, as if thinking about something, and finally said, "I don't want you to go there." "But you know I have to go." Jian Wushuang said the same. Xiaodigen turned around and suddenly stretched out his palms to hold his arms tightly, and then said, "A Chinese year is very fast, can you not go?" "It only takes a Chinese year, and with his ability, he will be absolutely safe." Jian Wushuang heard the words, pulled away his palm without knowing the trace, shook his head and said firmly, "A year too long. Even the heavens are enough to collapse. Dai Qingbin was banished in the Sea of No Sea because of me. I must go and take him out of it, otherwise I can't feel at ease. If he didn't do it for me, then it would be me who was banished into the borderless sea at this moment." Little Emperor said in a hoarse voice, "But do you know what is imprisoned in the endless sea? Those are the sources of chaos in the old realm. Even my emperor dare not relax when entering the endless sea. Do you know? I might as well tell you now that once I was exiled into the borderless sea, I was almost sentenced to death." There was no waves in Jian Wu's double-faced color, and he calmly said, "Even so, I must go. Then I tell you, if you go in, there is a 99 chance that you will die in it." Xiaodigen's eyes showed tension and solemnity. "You must go," he said firmly. Hearing this answer, Xiao Dijuan stopped saying more, as if he had been relieved of most of his strength and sat on the jade steps. After a while he said, "The Sea of No Edge is tangible and intangible, and it is a place bounded by nothingness and reality. Even Dian Immortal will be lost in it. There is no real exit to the Sea of Borders, or it is said that only my emperor knows. But now, the key to the Sea of Borders is in your hands." Jian Wushuang heard the words, moved in his heart, and stretched out his hand to take out the golden jade ring, containing the true shadow of Emperor Wuyang. This was given to him by Xiaodigen when he went to Domitian, and saved his life on the void battlefield. Carefully rubbing the golden jade ring in his hand, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but said, "With this, you can go to the borderless sea?" Little Emperor nodded. "This ring contains the aura of my emperor, and can open that passage." "How to use?" "Follow me." In the void, Jian Wushuang, dressed as a ranger and wearing a large black robe, stood in a very dark place. Beside him, there were only two companions, Xiao Dijuan and Thin Zipeo. The three bodies are like three eternal sculptures, and the void and wind cannot infect them. Has it been decided? Little Emperor turned his head to look at him. Jian Wushuang nodded and said no more. Then, he slowly stretched out his palm, and the golden jade ring exuded a unique and magnificent glow in the chaotic void. The next moment, Jian Wushuang threw the ring in his hand into the void. In an instant, the void suddenly collapsed and torn. Thousands of brilliant lights burst out of the golden jade ring, illuminating the vast void. The flowing huamang is the emperor's way of heaven. They directly tore through the void, forming an endless passage. The river of stars turned, and the dappled stars were shining in the passage. The passage to the borderless sea is here. Ahead is the sea of no edge. Little Emperor said in a weak voice. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then he was about to step into it. At the same time, Xiao Dijuan quietly stretched out his palm and grabbed his right arm, silently looking at him without a word. Don't worry, as long as I don't want to die, I will definitely come back safely, Jian Wushuang said as he looked at him, and then stretched out his palm. Stepping into the passage with one step, the void oscillated, and then the huge galaxy passage slowly closed. The black robe finally disappeared completely in the passage, and was never seen again. The void was smoothed by the gang wind, and everything seemed to have never happened. My buddy, did I harm him? The voice was hoarse and slightly sad. The thin purple robe figure also moved slightly, and after a long time he said, His Royal Highness, you shouldn't let him in, even if Master Jian is shocking Hong Tianjiao. I am afraid it is impossible to walk out of there alive. After all, there is a completely unknown territory. I regret it. I don't want him to leave. Xiao Dijuan looked at the smooth passage and slowly closed his eyes. The galaxy was surging. Everything was like a river of stars. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the top of the tide and hurried towards the end of the passage. This galaxy channel is not as dangerous as Jian Wushuang thought. It can even be said to be very peaceful, like a quiet river. But the more so, the less careless it is. And it is far from possible that the realm that can make Diqing be so jealous is far from being as calm as it is. With entering the channel, everything is just beginning. Chapter 49-29. Turbulent undercurrents are often hidden under the calm water. Jian Wushuang knew this sentence well, and soon encountered it. He was far from expecting that everything would come so fast that he was caught off guard. Above the thick and ink-like endless waters, a beast with 10 evil reveals roared in anger. In front of this ugly behemoth, there was a sharp eyebrow, and the figure with the Xuanhe pattern surging all over his body was facing away from it. Jian Wushuang at this moment had a cold face, but his heart had already complained. He never imagined that he would be able to recite to such an extent when he stepped on the spot. Just after falling from the passage, the endless dark sea suddenly separated, and then an ugly beast with 10 heads opened its huge mouth and swallowed it towards him. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's vigilance, I'm afraid it would have fallen directly into the beast's mouth. Seeing a dark halo on the head of the giant beast in front of him, Jian Wushuang felt his head grow. Because only the Dayan Immortal who is above rank 5 can condense his own aura of growth, which is a symbol of realm. Jian Wushuang never expected that he would provoke such a murder if he only stepped into the area of this borderless sea. Facing rank 3 Dayan Immortal is enough for Jian Wushuang today, but rank 6 Dayan Immortal may not be so optimistic. I'm afraid it will be a fate. But before stepping into this borderless sea, you have to fight for your life, and the road behind is probably even more impossible. It is Jian Wushuang's task to retain his best physical strength. Facing such a giant beast, he also understood why Xiao Dijuan had prevented him from entering here before. What will be imprisoned in this so-called borderless sea? Above the dark and thick sea, the behemoth raised 10 heads at the same time and let out a huge roar. Under this huge roar, Jian Wushuang felt a pause in his figure. That is to say, in this moment of effort, the giant beast suddenly opened its forelimbs and rushed forward with a strong momentum. The sky was shaking, and Jian Wushuang hurriedly released the ancestral technique. The gate of power reappeared, and a giant finger from the sky came down. However, the giant beast just raised his head and let an ancestral art fall on it. Boom! The sea is raging, igniting the waves of thousands of feet, and the ancestral art that grew with Jian Wushuang's growth fell on the monster. And it didn't stop for a moment. Unprepared, Jian Wushuang was suddenly knocked out of the distance. The clouds were plowed into a deep gully, and he had been marking 100,000 feet before he barely stopped his figure. Jian Wushuang was already solemn as he held back the blood churning in his heart. The strength of rank 6 Dian Immortal was far beyond his imagination. Right now, this behemoth may be fighting with all its strength, and it will be very difficult. If it is consumed in this way, it is definitely not conducive to the next situation. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang felt a little irritable, reaching out his hand to take out a D-pin pill from his arms and stuffing it into his mouth to chew it. We have no grievances and no grudges, and we can't fight to the death. You can't help me for a while. How about letting me go? Facing the giant beast, Jian Wushuang tried to communicate. A total of 10 heads, 20 pairs of eyes looked at him together. Just as Jian Wushuang was preparing to fight, all the 10 heads of the giant beast actually spoke. The voice was hoarse and thick. Deportee, what did you just eat? Jian Wushuang was startled, and soon understood the meaning of the giant beast's mouth. And then he directly stretched out his hand, and took out a D-pin pill from his arms, and raised it in the air. Suddenly, the extremely strong medicinal scent completely escaped in the air. Each of these Emperor pills is an Emperor treasure that the Emperor Lu Crow collected in the past, and is the supreme quality. The medicinal scent that was so strong that it could not be repelled filled almost every inch of the sky. The giant beast also opened his eyes wide at this moment. Guru! The throbbing twitch of the stomach resounded everywhere, and it was obviously greedy to the extreme. Here, give me. Jian Wushuang heard this and smiled quietly. Of course I can give it to you, but you have to let me go without any entanglement. I promise you. The giant beast's eyes were red, and it was salivating. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. He directly bent his finger and shot the pill 1,000 feet away. In an instant, the giant beast also chased it out. He took advantage of this opportunity to fly and smash away. Feeling the disappearance of the sensational breath, Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time he was a little dumbfounded. Just relying on a pill to flick a 6th ranked Dian Immortal is really incredible. But the smile on his face hadn't solidified yet, and a sound of breaking into the air resounded from behind him. Jian Wushuang hurriedly turned around and saw that the behemoth appeared again. What are you going to do? Haven't you already said it? He said condensely. Hearing this, the behemoth anthropomorphically smacked his mouth, then stretched out his huge forepalm and pointed to his head. Anything else? I have 10 heads. One is not enough. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Do you think I have a lot of pills of this level? The one I just gave you is the last one for me. He slapped his lips again, and the giant beast looked at him unwillingly, as if he was considering the truth or not. After a long while, the giant beast said, Then you go, don't let me see you, and don't appear in my realm again. Jian Wushuang flew away directly, did not stop for a moment, and disappeared in an instant. And this time the beast did not catch up. It lay on the thick sea, with 10 big heads thinking about something. It's really strange, how could such a weak exile be exiled here? Has he done too many terrible things before? The giant beast was thinking, and soon it dived directly into the dark sea, turned into a waterline, and marched forward. He kept flying over hundreds of millions of miles without stopping, until he felt that there was no aura chasing behind him. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh of relief. The breath of rank 6 Dian Immortal is too terrifying. If you continue to fight resolutely, I am afraid you will be seriously injured. Fortunately, he has completely escaped the control of that breath now. But Jian Wushuang did not relax his vigilance at all. He quickly found some pills that could cover his breath among the Emperor Pin pills he brought, and after swallowing them, he began to look at everything in front of him. The so-called sea without borders means seas with no margins. And right now, The thickened ink sea is like a mirror. I don't know where it extends without any reference. Barren and dead. Chapter 49:30. Jian Wushuang tried to release his strength again, to touch the infinite sea under him. I saw that the power entering the water was directly 10 swallowed. Giant capitals opened their mouths, and then there were countless chain-like their mouths. Aura protruding the terrifying from under the water surface, belonging to rank 6 Dian Immortal directly shook Jian Wushuang away. Was shocked in an instant. You want to die? And hurriedly jumped into the air, and the behemoth before that being dragged into the sea by the black chain was still trailing behind him again. And even the truth he was looking for this time and began to rejoice secretly that he hadn't set foot in the sea just now. But the behemoth that swallowed the truth into its belly still didn't understand that the hidden dangers of the sea of boundlessness Jian Wushuang was already far more than what was revealed. He directly condensed the invisible sword who can be trapped facing the giant the realm of Dian Immortal. After avoiding 10 giant beasts without any risk, that is completely free from Wushuang didn't dare to act rashly anymore. This is a superb sword of Jian After swallowing an emperor-grade pill that could breathe smoothly, the crispest sword sounded through the wilds and speed. And earlier, I learned from the little emperor that this boundless sea is such between an absolute the tangible sword broke and opened the power barrier of the giant beast, and the intangible, and then stabbed one of the heads heavily. And it is unclear whether it is real, the sword just a virtual infinitely wide and wide. This has virtually and directly smashed a big sun-like head. Under the pain, the beast was frightened and spit out a wave of cracks. Tangible and intangible, the full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal from intangibility to quality. Body. This means that it is very likely to be feet away. The power of protecting the immortal body shattered directly. This is undoubtedly a difficult problem. He vomited blood. It is basically impossible to find the truth figure. In this almost endless sea, looked down at his already somewhat collapsed chest, only pondered for a while. Couldn't help becoming he swept serious. Forward resolutely. The full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal was there was an undulating water line if it weren't for wearing a 9-day mysterious. am
Damn
afraid
it,
the immortal
isn't there a piece
experience
of
would
land
be
in this
broken.
borderless sea?
The vast expanse of power
Wuxia,
filled
who
every
had
inch
flown
of
out an
space,
unknown distance,
and the
was
sacred
full of
mountain-like
black lines.
figure of the giant
At his
beast
current speed,
also appeared in
I am
front of
afraid
Jian
that he has
Wuxuang.
already flown
There
over
were
the
originally
distance of
10
thousands
heads,
of celestial
but now only
planes,
9 are left,
but still has
has not
slammed
found
the
a
blood
piece
from
of
the
land.
dark mane.
This
and
has
said
even
in a
made
low
him
voice,
wonder if he is standing
Junior,
still.
do you know that I
There
am
is not
saving
only
you?
a piece of land
Save me?
here,
Did
but
you know
even
that
a
you
breath of
swallowed
power
the
has
person I
never
was looking
appeared,
for?
making him
Wipe
a
away
little
the blood from the
dignified.
corners of
Just
the
as
mouth.
Jian
Calm
Wuxuang
Jian
swiftly
Wuxuang
moved
said
forward,
coldly.
a
Spit
sudden and
him out to
extreme
me.
cry for help
Spit it
came
out.
from under him.
It was crushed
Help.
into dregs long
Help.
ago when I was eating
He followed
it.
his eyes and
The
looked
giant
down,
beast said
and
grimly.
he couldn't help but feel
Now,
shocked.
you are ready to
I
pay
saw
the
an
price and
extremely
fall
weak
into my
figure
belly
floating on the
obediently.
thickening surface.
After it finished
He tried his
speaking,
best to push
the
aside the
remaining 9
water
heads
and
roared
tried to
wildly
escape
at
the
this
sea,
moment,
crying
the air
for help.
stagnated.
In this
And
extremely
Jian
silent
Wuxuang's
sea of
figure
no
was trapped
edge,
for a moment.
such a weird scene
Then the
appeared.
giant beast
Even
roared
Jian
and rushed
Wuxuang
over,
felt an
and the
unspeakable
clouds were
weirdness.
torn apart by his
Almost
giant
99%
claws.
of the
Although
people
the anger
who can
was
be
banished
extremely
in this
furious,
borderless sea,
Jian
are
Wuxuang did not
extremely
lose
evil
his mind.
people.
If
And
Jian
rank 6
Wuxuang
Dayan
moved
could
his
not resist
compassion
him
to
at
save
all.
him,
If he
might
desperately
fall into a
fights
great
his life,
passivity.
the ultimate
Thinking
fate
of
is
this,
very
he no
likely
longer
that he will also
hesitated,
fall.
ready to leave
Di
directly.
Qing had been swallowed
But
by
the
that
figure that
giant
was
beast
ups and
into his
downs in the
belly.
sea said loudly at this moment.
What Jian
Help,
Wuxuang
the
had
heavenly
to do
fairy
now was
help.
not to fight his
Jian
life,
Wuxuang couldn't help
but to
but
find
look
a
at
way
that
to get
figure
out of
subconsciously.
here. After
With his
unleashing
eyes
Yanli
facing
with all
each
his
other,
strength,
he was
and
completely
barely
shocked.
blocking a blow from
The
the
figure
giant
that floats
beast.
in the sea is
Jian
not someone
Wuxuang
else.
did not intend to
It is
fight
the truth
anymore,
exiled
and
by
fled
Zhen
directly.
Di Qing? After Jian Wuxuang once again confirmed that the sea area was Di Qing, he immediately fell from the clouds and prepared to give aid. Di Qing, who was ups and downs in the sea, couldn't help but be overjoyed when he saw Jian Wuxuang fall immediately. At this very moment, the sea surface, which was originally like a crystal, suddenly stirred up tens of thousands of waves. About to touch Di Qing's Jian Wuxuang, he felt that the sky in front of him was covered by darkness. The sea was divided, and a giant mountain-like beast leaped high. It has 10 heads, and each one is like a day, terrifying to the extreme. Chapter 4931. Even if Jian Wuxuang could cross the border for a battle, the number of Dayan immortals that fell under his hands exceeded 3. But in the face of such a vicious rank 6 Dayan immortal, he still couldn't fight one. Above Dayan immortal, every third turn is a complete transformation, and the third turn to the 6th turn is a big change. That giant beast could easily break Jian Wuxuang's ancestral skills, even the immortal style, which made him extremely strenuous. If it weren't for Jiutian Yishuan, who had endured most of the heavy injuries, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang would be hardly capable of fighting at this moment. That kind of vigorous and pervasive strength made him suffer so much that it gave Jian Wushuang an illusion that the behemoth in front of him was not a behemoth, but an immortal that had experienced many battles. If you continue to fight, you will only be exhausted by the giant beast. After Jian Wushuang figured out this question, he directly used Wushuang's sword Dao to force him back, and then fled quickly. Wanna go? The giant beast's eyes condensed, and it apparently had a murderous heart, and 9 giant mouths simultaneously spit out pitch-black ons. The 9 pillars merged into one, soaring into the sky, directly hitting Jian Wushuang's back. Boom! Unparalleled strength burst open. He was inevitable, and completely withstood the blow. At this moment, Jiutiani Xian burst out the most magnificent blue, protecting Jian Wushuang's fairy body. But even so, the vast generative power stunned him in an instant, and plunged into the thick sea. The strength seems to be used up. The giant beast shook his head and said, then looked at the figure that had fallen into the sea, and threw himself at it. The immortal body entered the water. An unimaginable sense of deep cold invaded his body, and Jian Wushuang passed out completely. The giant beast stepped into the air, and when he was about to open his mouth and swallow Jian Wushuang into his abdomen, a black chain as thick as an arm came out from under the sea, quickly entangled Jian Wushuang's limbs, and dragged it away. Seeing this kind of chain, the behemoth is like a big enemy, and fear flashes in his eyes. But this fear only existed for a moment, and then it opened its huge mouth again, and bit at Jian Wushuang who had passed out. However, the speed of the entangled chain was so fast that the giant beast swept away. Jian Wushuang was entangled in chains, and he went directly to the bottom of the sea, and soon disappeared without a trace. The giant beast roared, and finally he could do nothing. Wither cold, dead silence, and various unpredictable negative effects pervasively eroded Jian Wushuang's fairy body. He barely had some consciousness, but he couldn't run a trace of energy at all. He could only let the entangled chains drag him into the endless abyss. He barely opened his eyes and soon passed out again. Wow! The iron chain rubbed against the stone to make a toothy sound, mixed with the sound of howling water, resounding in Jian Wushuang's ears. He only felt the sea beating his back, and there was hard land under him. I don't know how long it took. When the meridian began to flow, Jian Wushuang finally woke up. He propped up the fairy body that was almost falling apart with his hands, and barely sat on the ground. At this time, he realized that there was hard land under him. It turns out that there is still land in this borderless sea. He was a little surprised and soon returned to calm. Under the final blow of the giant beast, even though Jian Wushuang was surrounded by 9 days of clothing, he still received the heaviest trauma. Although the immortal body was not broken, the meridians were almost broken every inch, and now he is struggling to even run his energy. There was a gray-white land under him, and there was no abnormal fluctuation. Jian Wushuang also sat up in the race against time. In this weird borderless sea, he must maintain his state to reach the peak before he can leave here alive. It wasn't until this moment that Jian Wushuang had some understanding that the one swallowed by the giant beast didn't seem to be a clear one. That figure seemed to use a certain secret technique to transform his face into a clear look, in order to confuse him. Moreover, the practice of that figure also strengthened Jian Wushuang's idea. As proud as Di Qing, even in the face of Zhen Weiyang's calm existence, how could he lose his stance in that situation? At the same time, it is even more impossible for him to be swallowed by the giant beast without any struggle. After figuring it out, Jian Wushuang swallowed another Emperor Pin pill, and recovered with all his strength. With the nourishment of Emperor Pin pill, the recovery speed of the immortal body is fast to the extreme. Within half a day, Jian Wushuang had recovered 90%. He slowly opened his eyes. A pattern was flowing all over his body. And then he looked down at Jiutiani Xian, who exuded a faint blue tint on his chest. What material is this thing made of? Is it so against the sky? Jian Wushuang muttered. Jiutiani Xian, who was able to block the full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal, hadn't even left a trace. Maybe it could really withstand the full blow of the Emperor. Converging his mind, Jian Wushuang began to look at this continent. This is not so much a continent, but rather an isolated island. The gray-white rock under my feet was full of potholes, and no weeds grew. I looked at the extreme desolation and loneliness. After thinking about it for a moment, Jian Wushuang walked towards the depths of the secret realm of this isolated island. Hee, there's another guy who lives and lives. An ethereal voice suddenly rang in Jian Wushuang's ear. He was shocked and looked directly at a raised boulder beside him. Immediately afterwards, a short-stature old man in thick fur walked out from behind the boulder. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he saw the old man's neck with a thick chain. That kid, you were also banished in? The old man in thick fur looked at Jian Wushuang, as if he was looking at a treasure. Although he was holding back, Jian Wushuang could see his strangeness at a glance. Yes, you reading www. Akanshu.com was banished. Jian Wushuang said calmly. The old man couldn't help nodding. Then do you know where is this place? Where? A weird smile appeared on his face and blood-red gums were exposed. Then let me tell you that this is a fallen paradise. And every guy who comes here has only two paths. Be killed or survive. This is the exiled free ranch. The old man slowly raised his arms and said with a strange smile. As his voice fell, a terrifying force belonging to Dianxian diffused. Although you are a little Yanxian, it is enough for me, the old man said greedily. In the next moment, he swept towards Jian Wushuang very quickly, opened his palm and patted it fiercely. Chapter 4932. Facing the trouble of a Dian immortal who was only in the initial realm. Jian Wushuang snorted coldly, and 30,000 sword and tint emerged in his palm. In the next moment, he directly confronted Dian Immortal. Boom! There was a sudden explosion in the air, turning the two ancestral arts into a punch, and the resulting explosion was extremely prosperous. Then there was a scream. I saw that the old man who was like a wolf before was directly hit by Jian Wushuang's punch and flew out. This scene was something Jian Wushuang hadn't expected. He was a little confused as he watched the old man, who flew thousands of feet far away, and then hit the ground heavily. This obviously belongs to the old man of Dian Immortal Realm, and he is too weak. Jian Wushuang felt that if he used more strength earlier, he could directly explode it. He was puzzled, and then flew to the old man who fell on his back. The old man panted heavily, his face was covered with blood, and when he saw Jian Wushuang coming over, he hurriedly got up and backed up. Only panic was left in his eyes. You, who on earth are you? How can a small Yinxian have such strength? He covered his face and said with a trembling voice, Of course it is the one who wants your life. Jian Wushuang said coldly, then raised his palm. For the enemy, Jian Wushuang never had any mercy. When the old man heard the words, his face was ashen ashes. And then he knelt down with a plop. Please raise your hand and let me go. I have lived in this endless sea for countless years, and I just want to be able to go out alive one day. As long as adults can give me a way out, I am willing to do anything. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm and stopped killing. Tell me, where is this place? Have any strange faces been here in these days? The old man received amnesty. Master Hui, this place is called Exile Ranch. I don't know when it was created, but the one who created this place is still alive, and is responsible for controlling the order here. It's called the Exile Ranch. It's actually because there are a large number of exiles here. If we want to survive, we can only fight endlessly. The dead Dian Immortal was used to fill the ground under his feet to stabilize this place. Having said that, the old man pointed to the chain around his neck. Only by killing a certain number of Dian Immortals can the chain be unlocked and live here. How many have you killed? Jian Wushuang looked at him. Ashamed, there is no one at all. The old man said with shame, I just want to continue to live. Jian Wushuang heard the words and said, Then in these days, have you seen any strange faces come here? Very tall, very heroic, with golden feathers in the hair. Listening to his description, the old man pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. Beat people. This sea of boundlessness is almost a stagnant water. In the past few years, no exile has entered the person you described. It is impossible to come here. A frustration flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and then he turned around to leave. My lord, it's dangerous to exile the pasture. I asked the adults not to stay here anymore, and leave as soon as possible. The old man stepped forward quickly, watching him gritted his teeth and said, The sooner the better. Although Jian Wushuang was a little confused, he also saw that he did not seem to be lying. After nodding, he was ready to leave here. However, everything is already a bit late. I saw several Wu Guang burst out from the 4 fields, and then stood in front of Jian Wuliang. A total of 4 bodies appeared with a strong and powerful body, and they all locked the strange visitor in an instant. 3 short and 1 high, 3 Dian Immortals in the initial realm, and 1 3-ranked Dian Immortal. Each of them is full of power to the extreme, but their eyes were all red, as if they had seen prey. The old man's complexion changed drastically, and he whispered, My lord, let's go. If you don't go, you can't leave. Jian Wu's double-face color is also a little dignified. If he is dealing with a single Dian Immortal, he is not afraid at all, but now he is directly dealing with the 4 Dian Immortals. And the situation is already extremely unoptimistic. At this moment, the tallest one of the 4 Dian Immortals saw the old man beside Jian Wushuang, and suddenly sneered. So you old sheep boy dare to do it too? Is this your prey? The new exile? The old man called Lao Yanga gritted his teeth, and finally said, Yes, this is my prey, you leave. The 4 Dian Immortals smiled at the same time. Just you, the old sheep herder, dare to talk like this? Your prey. The tallest Dian Immortal walked out, and with a wave of air, the unparalleled strength of the time immediately drew it away. The old man flew 100 meters away like a broken kite, and then fell to the ground. All this happened so quickly. When Jian Wushuang reacted, the 4 Dayan immortals had already rushed towards him. The 4 unmatched powers burst into one corner of this continent. The air trembles. Obviously can't bear the power of Dayan immortal. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyebrows quietly circulated a 7-star system. Xian style, a little mountain and river. The current bit of mountains and rivers is no longer the previous bit of mountains and rivers. It has already grown with Jian Wushuang's growth. He suddenly opened his 5 fingers and burst into a huge torrent. Yanli turned into a torrent and spewed out, and unexpectedly swept out the 3 big Yangtzeans who had rushed to the front. Boom! The torrent burst open, shocking the 4 Dayan immortals in embarrassment. After being able to stop his figure, the shortest of them, Dayan immortal, furiously said, "Damn it! I must kill you today." After he finished speaking, a Jiangsu spear suddenly condensed in his hand, and then he threw it at Jian Wushuang. The long spear was rising against the storm, and thousands of handles were separated in an instant, coming like a rain of guns. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang didn't panic at all, as he quietly condensed an invisible sword in his hand. Standing with the sword, the long wind stirred the corners of his clothes, making him reveal a desolate and lonely breath. Wushuang Kendo, Zingyahe Jianyini, the first style. Star. No fancy sword came straight out. In an instant, a million sword intent came right away. The gun rain that came from nearly 1,000 handles. When it touched these sword intents, it was directly crushed, without even leaving any breath. And that sword rushed forward unabated, tearing the land under his feet. The little Dayan immortal, who was the first to bear the brunt, was suddenly shocked. He never expected that this sword would be so terrifying. The sword intent was like a mountain, like a sea, and immediately wrapped him in. The other 3 Dayan immortals avoided in time, and then watched this scene with a little fright. Chapter 49-33. The entire boundless sea is under this vertical and horizontal sword intent, setting off a huge wave of millions of feet, almost bordering the sky. The 3 Dayan immortals who evaded looked at the crazy sword curtain and looked at Jian Wushuang with lingering fears. How could this guy who can fight Dayanxian be Yanxian? Could it be that he is someone who has been exiled for countless years and came here deliberately pretending to be a fairy? Thinking of this, they all put away their contempt and prepared for the first battle. The sword intent that covered the sky and sun finally dissipated. The 3 Dayan immortals gasped at this scene. At this moment, the clothes on that little Dayanxian's body were all crushed bloody, and there was almost no good meat on the fairy's body. He was crumbling, his figure was about to stand up. "You, who are you?" Suddenly spit out a large mouthful of divine blood, and he was terrified to the point where it could not be added. With just one sword, a Dayan immortal was forced to such a level, and it was also easy to reach the extreme. I am afraid that even the 3rd-ranked Dayan immortal can't do it. The other 3 Dayan immortals all backed away without a trace, their eyes dignified. The old man who wiped a nosebleed hurriedly sat up from the ground and watched this scene with wide eyes. Putting away the invisible sword, Jian Wushuang carried his hands on his back. His face was calm, and he walked slowly without any fear. Facing the 4 Dayan immortals, although he appeared extremely calm, he was already sweating in his heart. After all, they are facing the 4 Dayan immortals. If you don't suppress them in aura, it will be impossible to escape next. Regardless of whether it can be beaten or not, I will frighten them before speaking. Just you dare to block my way? Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, his voice full of supreme authority. The little Dayan immortal, who nearly fell under that sword, retreated again and again. Although he wanted revenge, he didn't dare to have any ideas. Don't dare to stop the adult from going. You can leave immediately. He snorted coldly when he heard the words, then looked straight ahead, without looking at the few Dayan immortals, and went straight forward. None of the 4 Dayan immortals dared to stop them. They could only watch Jian Wushuang leave. Seeing them deflated, the old man grinned happily, and then hurried to Jian Wushuang. "My lord, wait for me." The old man followed him with a pleasing smile on his face. "You definitely don't know how to leave here. I promised to take the adults out safely." Listening to his words, Jian Wushuang said, "Why is this continent still only able to enter but not exit?" The old man nodded. "It is true that you can only get in but not out. Once you leave, you will be alarmed by that person's breath. If he makes a move at that time, I'm afraid you really can't leave, my lord." "The one in your mouth is very powerful?" Jian Wushuang raised his brow slightly. "It's not just amazing, it's amazing to the extreme. Here he is the supreme existence. Even if the 9th-ranked Dian immortal confronts him, he can't hurt him at all," the old man said, with a little panic and a little fear in his eyes. Jian Wushuang didn't speak anymore. Just as he said, the mysterious existence that casts this continent is probably beyond the level of rank 9 Dian immortal. Could it be the emperor? He thought in his heart, and quickly denied this idea. Even if Zhen Wuyang was strong at the beginning, I am afraid that he would not be able to seal the capital of the emperor. Of course, all this is just Jian Wushuang's guess. He doesn't want to know the truth or not. The most urgent thing is to leave here as soon as possible. What should I do with brother? Did you really let that guy run away? Shocked by Jian Wushuang, a few Daexians who were afraid to move talked in a low voice. The Dian immortal, who was almost cut into a blood gourd, was indignant. "Let's go with the 4 of us. I don't believe I can't get him one." "Idiot, you are almost beaten to death, do you know?" The tallest Dian immortal, and the only 3rd-ranked Dian immortal, said in a bad mood. "If we rashly attack him, you must be the first to die." "Then what shall we do now? We really let him go?" Another short stature, Dian Xian with 2 beards, said anxiously. "Kill him, you can change a merit." At this time, a small, dark-faced and extremely calm little Dian said, "This little Zhao Yangxian can't change a merit." "Second, what are you talking about? He is really an immortal?" the tall Dian immortal hurriedly asked. He nodded. Although he doesn't know what secret method is used to beat the 3rd child like this, his aura can't be changed. It is undoubtedly a fairy. "Then what are we waiting for? Just rush to kill him and avenge me." The 3rd child, who was holding his head, said cruelly. The tall Dian immortal was thinking about something, and quickly gritted his teeth. "Damn! This time I can't let go of this little merit. With the 4 of us, I don't believe that you can't kill the guy. Just take a step back for the 4 of us together. He can't help us." They glanced at each other, and then rushed straight ahead. "No adults," and they caught up. The old man said hurriedly, but when Jian Wushuang reacted, everything was too late. For streams of light came down, blocking all his retreat from 4 directions. Seeing this situation, the old man was fighting with his legs, almost losing his footing. Jian Wushuang was also frozen in his heart, and the thing he worried about the most had indeed come. The oppressive forces released by the 4 Dian immortals were extremely terrifying, and almost suppressed all their breath. The exile in this borderless sea, so far, the lowest level he has encountered is Dian immortal, which is simply unimaginable in the outside world. And this also caused Jian Wushuang to be very passive. Hugging his arms, the tall big Yin Xian with a non-smiling expression on his face looked at him without squinting. "Boy, save your life. I will spare you a whole body." "My lord, you can't listen to him. Once you lose, the ferry will be filled into the land under your feet." The old man reminded nervously. "Lao Yanghua, if you don't go back to herd the sheep, this seat will be filled into the land with you." The tall Dianxian said angrily. Jian Wushuang, who has not spoken all the time, glanced at him at this moment, and then said quietly, "My life needs you to take it, but not anyone can take it. Don't believe it." The tall Dian immortal smiled grimly, and the whole body surged out, instantly covering the sky and the sun. "Then I will try it today. How many caddies do you have?" The calm-faced 2nd child hurriedly reminded at this moment. "Big brother, don't be impulsive." But he waved his hand. "None of you should participate in this battle." Chapter 49-34. Jian Wushuang was overjoyed when he heard the words. As long as they are not together, there is still a chance of winning. Now Jian Wushuang is confident that even if he doesn't use his strongest sword, it is enough to suppress the third-ranked Dayan Immortal. Therefore he is not afraid. The strong Dayan Immortal must also pay for his arrogance. He waved his hands to block his three brothers from the battle circle. Gao Zhuang de Yinxian smiled grimly. Only greed was left in Jian Wushuang's eyes. In the next moment, he took the lead, and the power of the earth-shaking power was revealed at this moment. As the mountains and seas were pouring, even Jian Wushuang held his breath. The old man's complexion changed drastically, and after taking a look at Jian Wushuang next to him, he gritted his teeth and ran out of the ring. Facing the extreme strength, he didn't show any movement, just like a sculpture, standing still. This made the tall and strong Dayanxian extremely angry. He shook his arms suddenly, aimed at Jian Wushuang and slammed over. In an instant, the world was prosperous, and layers of black ripples burst out. There are 1,000 layers, and mysterious runes flow in the middle of each layer, surging with an unimaginable general trend. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were also solemn, and his right hand was condensed into a fist, facing the black ripples that enveloped him. A punch! Boom! The unspeakable blast broke out, and deep gullies were cracked on the ground. Time seemed to stand still, and nearly 1,000 layers of black ripples hovered in front of Jian Wushuang, and it was difficult to make any further progress. The three Dayan Immortals outside the battle circle all watched this scene nervously. Jian Wushuang, who smashed a punch with all his strength, did not close the fist, but remained still. The land under his feet has cracked deep gullies, like a spider web, radiating thousands of feet in an instant. In the next moment, the nearly 1,000 layers of black ripples split apart from the heart of Jian Wushuang's fist. As the dark clouds dispersed, the great power of that kind of power was shattered. Wu Guang dissipated, and the tall and powerful Yinxian looked at Jian Wushuang in horror. This is his extremely strong immortal style. Even the Dayan Immortal of the same realm has to avoid it. But right now this is just a mere fairy, who actually blocked his immortal style. This is so incredible that Gao Zhuangda Yinxian dare not stop to release the second fairy style. Great alien! He roared angrily, raising his arms to the top of his head, and at the same time, the infinite power gathered in his palm. An eye wheel with the size of 10,000 meters condensed at this moment. Jian Wushuang, who retracted his fist, looked up at the void. The black eye chakra that was completely imaginary by Yanli was a full tens of thousands of meters in size, and lightning and thunder snakes condensed in it. As the force of extension became more and more condensed, the eye chakra stared completely, like a magic eye, traversing the world. Under the shroud of this eye chakra, everything became dim. Haha, let the ants die to this seat. The tall and strong Yinxian, who stood in the void, laughed grinningly. As his voice resounded, between his arms, the terrifying eye will slowly opened. Numerous strands of silky power burst down from that eye chakra, and the dark purple power swallowed the sky and covered the sun, terrifying. Under the light of that eye wheel, the ground directly incinerated a layer, and quickly approached Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was solemn to the extreme, and the next moment his whole body suddenly condensed a layer of blood. The scarlet lines are extremely scarlet. This is the way of slaughter. The way of slaughter that Yuanjun transforms the blood hidden in his body. It means the ultimate killing. Once the way of killing is opened, Jian Wushuang's consciousness will fall into an extreme thirst for blood, and at the same time, his own strength will even far exceed the addition of the true shadow of the self. Facing the demon eye's offensive, he opened the way of killing. At this moment, it was the confrontation between scarlet and dark purple. The earth enveloped by the meaning of dark purple suddenly condensed the meaning of scarlet. It was like a red prairie fire, full of grandeur. Even if the beam cast by the eye will swallowed it all, it still squeezed a crack abruptly. The black robe on Jian Wushuang was completely shattered, revealing his chest with crimson patterns. A dash, he roared, and the next moment he directly faced the endless dark purple force, blasting off into the air. Under his impact, all the Yanli beams were broken, Seeing the scarlet figure that had tore through the infinite barrier, rushing towards him, the tall and powerful Yin Xian was already speechless in horror, and even forgot to move. Boom! Jian Wushuang threw a fist, and the terrifying fist gang directly shredded the last layer of dark purple Yanli barrier. Fist gang greeted the storm and rose by 1,000,000 feet, with endless killing intentions, and finally blasted above the dark purple magic eye without any hindrance. This was the moment when the sky was so sad, the infinite meaning of killing, like a real sword, pierced into the eye of the demon. There was no magnificent and shocking death, and even this scene only existed for a moment. Then, everything disappeared like a passing glance. The tens of millions of feet of demon eye was shattered by the bombardment, and the tall and strong Yin Xian was dazed in place, and he didn't even react. By the time he reacted, the figure with the whole body lingering around the scarlet lightness had disappeared. Then he felt a sharp pain in his chest, something broken. The tall and strong Yin Xian only feels that the energy in the fairy body is passing fast, and it is impossible to condense again. He subconsciously looked down at his chest. I saw a palm pierced his chest from behind, and took out an extremely bright star. That is the source of immortality, belonging to the source of the three-turn Dian Immortal. The next moment, the palm of the hand was condensed, and Xianyuan was directly crushed. No, do not want. After Gao Zhuangda Yin Xian said these last words, he completely lost his breath, and smashed straight to the ground like garbage. With a boom, Yu reading www.akanshu.com stirred up thousands of feet of smoke and dust, and the tall and strong Yin Xian who had died, his corpse, when it fell to the ground, was directly sucked by some power, and turned into a gray stone. The world is dead. The old man opened his mouth wide, apparently completely shocked by the scene just now. None of the other 3 Dian Immortals recovered from that scene. Their eldest brother died in the hands of an immortal. The dark sky was all smudged blood red. Looking at the infinite sword intent that overwhelmed the sky, the 2 Dian Immortals' faces were dead gray, and then they let the sword intent trap them. Masses of blood mist exploded in the sky, and the millions of sword intent raging in vertical and horizontal directions finally dissipated. At this point, all the 4 Dian Immortals fell into Jian Wushuang's hands. With the retreat of the slaughterway, Jian Wushuang, who was standing in midair, stood unstable and almost fell off. He forcibly supported his figure, then quickly took out a few D-pin pills from his arms, and stuffed them into his mouth. The way of killing was too overbearing, even with Jian Wushuang's physique, almost completely overdrawn. If he hadn't carried nearly 1,000 imperial pills with him, he would definitely not easily release the way of killing. After swallowing the pills and quickly recovering 90% of his physique, Jian Wushuang prepared to leave. The battle with the 4 Dian Immortals was too shocking, and it is estimated that other Dian Immortals will soon hear the news. If you don't leave in time, I'm afraid you will burn yourself. It seems to be to confirm Jian Wushuang's thoughts. When he was about to leave, a swift sound of breaking through the sky flew over from all directions. Like the streamer of the big sun and stars, carrying the endless momentum soon appeared. At this time, the old man lying on the ground showed his head in horror and said, "My lord, run away. The guard is here. Don't be caught." Jian Wushuang also knew that it was not good. His feet suddenly stopped, and his figure rushed forward. But no matter how fast he was, it was no faster than a dozen Dian Immortals. After dozens of breaths with 10 body shapes, 10 Dian Immortals surrounded Jian Wushuang from every position. They all wore large black robes, and even their faces were hidden under the black robes, which was extremely mysterious. That's the case. Jian Wushuang also instantly noticed that the realm of every black-robed man was at the lowest level of rank 3 Dian Immortal. With a wave of the palm of the head of the black-robed man, a black bone whip measuring several feet long appeared in his hand in an instant. The black bone whip is like the spine of some kind of giant beast. I'm afraid that the ordinary evolving immortal will be wiped out with a whip. Those who destroy heaven and land will be destroyed immediately. A deep voice resounded from under the black robe. At the next moment, the headed black-robed man didn't say a word, and directly raised the black bone whip in his hand, and drew towards Jian Wushuang. The bone whip rose thousands of feet in the face of the storm, roaring like a roaring real dragon. He suddenly condensed in his heart. If the whip were to be used, he would lose more than half of his combat power on the spot. Chapter 49:36. The black bone whip swelled up to the storm, and every black bone spur on it protruded fiercely, surrounding infinite power. With such a whip on the body, I am afraid Jian Wushuang could not bear it with the immortal body. Seeing the arrival of these black-robed men, the old man lying on the ground was almost frightened, and quickly ran away. These people in black robes are all messengers under the seat, the real law enforcers of the so-called Tianlu, and if any immortal dared to destroy a piece of Tianlu, they will be punished. The light ones were beheaded on the spot, the immortal bodies filled the continent, and the heavy ones were drawn out of their souls, and endured endless years of flogging and punishment. Therefore, the Dayan immortal on this day and land, even if it is fighting and fighting, dare not destroy a little bit of the sky and land, because if it is destroyed, it will have the most severe punishment. But now, Jian Wushuang forcefully slashed the 4 Dayan immortals, and the sword intent he released was almost about to completely tear up the land of the sky and land. The destruction he caused was too terrifying, and the land had been overthrown by him. The land is divided into pieces by ravines like a moat, and the black water, as black as ink, is surging and surging, a scene of apocalypse. The immortal style released by Jian Wushuang only existed for a moment, and it was dissipated. 10 black-robed celestial immortals came from all directions. Each of them held a black bone whip in their hands, and with the swing of their arms, the bone whip was drawn towards Jian Wushuang like a real dragon. 10 bone whips, rising against the storm, blocked all directions and moved closer to the middle. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to resist. Crack! The delicate voice resounded directly at this moment, and the 10 bone whips intertwined and drew heavily on his fairy body. Jian Wushuang felt the darkness in front of him, almost fainting, and at the same time the bone whip was drawn on him. It was like 10,000 sacred mountains smashed towards him. There are hundreds of thousands, or even 1,000,000 roofs with 100 whips. Even the rank 6 Dayan immortal will never survive under this bone whip. At this moment, Jiutian Yixian bloomed with a blue meaning, fully protecting Jian Wushuang's fairy body. But even so, the immortal body under the 9 heavens' profound clothes had cracked scars, and blood spurted out. Jian Wushuang roared in pain, and his eyes became extremely red at this moment. He directly reached out, and held the bone whip wrapped around his neck, earning it fiercely. In an instant, the black bone whip shattered directly, and the bone fragments of the entire bone whip scattered to the ground. However, this was only the beginning. Jian Wushuang was surrounded by the scarlet divine mark, and the way of killing once again blessed the whole body. At the same time, the true shadow of selflessness with a hazy blue intent is also blessed at this moment. The sky blue, blending with the scarlet pattern, presents an unprecedented terrifying trend. This is the first time Jian Wushuang has merged the true shadow of selflessness and the way of killing. At this moment, hundreds of millions of saplings burst out of him. The black hair wrapped around the pattern broke apart and danced wildly in the air. His eyes are scarlet red, and his pupils are indeed sky blue without any impurities, so magnificent and sacred. The reaction of blessing the true shadow of the selfless on the way of killing is far more terrifying than Jian Wushuang's imagination. This is far from being as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, but a geometric upward trend. Jian Wushuang at this moment felt that even the immortal body could not contain that terrible power. In the next moment he roared loudly. With him as the center, the sky was directly torn apart, and the surging black water on the ground also set off huge waves. The black bone whip that entangled him was unable to withstand the great power at this moment, and was broken. The head of the black-robed man's eyes condensed under the hood, and he felt a tremor in his heart. No, it's impossible. How could I feel the tremor? He is just a mere fairy. He thought about it, but was quickly shocked by the scene before him. Jian Wushuang, whose limbs were almost locked, did not move, but the bone whip that bound him was quickly covered with cracks and was about to break. All the black-robed people were shocked. Looking at the cracked bone whip in their hands, they increased their strength again. The headed man in black felt something was wrong. He tried to retract the bone whip, but was shocked to find that the bone whip seemed to be sucked by some kind of suction, and he couldn't break free. There was something bad in his heart, and then he simply threw away the black bone whip in his hand. As he let go, Jian Wushuang also moved. A monstrous power surged from his body, and the bone whip on his limbs could no longer bear it at this moment. It was completely broken. Then, Jian Wushuang suddenly grasped the two bone whips around his waist and twisted it hard. In an instant, the two bone whips rotated, and the ferocious bone spurs on them were crushed into powder by the force. The two Tier 3 Dayan immortals who controlled the bone whip were unable to react at all, and the bone whip in his hand was twisted into a twist by that terrible force. But Julie did not disappear out of thin air, but transferred along the bone whip to the arms of two Dayanxians. What? The exclamation screamed loudly, and the unimaginable Julie broke the bone whip at the same time. It also directly screwed off the arms of the two Dayan immortals. Divine blood was spilled, and both arms fell into the void. All the black robes were shocked, and quickly backed away. Being able to break free of this bondage, he could never be as simple as Yanxian. The shackles on his body broke free. Jian Wushuang did not stop. His entire body shape was like a true sword converging extreme power, and he shot forward violently. In an instant, the originally encircled formation was shattered by the impact, and the two Dayan immortals whose arms were cut off could not withstand Jian Wushuang's offensive. Condensing the true shadow of the selfless and the way of killing, the violent scarlet fist directly blasted one of the black-robed Dayan immortal bodies into a big hole. Yu reading Xianyuan was also broken. For some unknown reason, all the Dayan immortals who were tied to this borderless sea had more or less reduced their strength to a certain extent. This is also the reason why Jian Wushuang would crush the ordinary Dayan immortal so easily. Chapter 49-37. After all, Dayan immortal is Dayan immortal. Even if his own strength is weakened for some reason, it is still terrifying to the extreme. Under the combined offensive of the 8 Dayan immortals, Jian Wushuang's counterattack was directly contained. Even with the true shadow of selflessness and the blessing of the way of killing, he was in a disadvantage. Can survive in this endless sea to this day. These Dayan immortals are all terrifying characters who have experienced thousands of battles. Town, headed by the black-robed Dayan immortal, screamed in a low voice. One party covered the sky and the golden seal directly suppressed Jian Wushuang, and the other 7 Dayan immortals all released their first blow at this moment. Suffering from the enemy, Jian Wushuang was inevitable, and once again abruptly resisted the full blow of the 8 Dayan immortals. The earth-shattering martyrdom explosion broke open, and the old man who was lying on the ground watching this scene nervously was so shocked that he had no time to escape with his legs, and was swept by an indescribable force. Like mountains and seas will fall, everything is like the end. This so-called heaven and land, nearly 1/10 of the plain, was reduced to ashes under this fierce battle. In the void, Jian Wushuang suddenly drew out a large mouthful of divine blood, his aura wilting to the extreme. The golden seal that came from that side directly broke his defense, and the remaining 7 immortals' full blows came over. If it weren't for the Jishianyi Xian body, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang's immortal body would directly collapse. Seeing that he just spit out a mouthful of divine blood, all the black-robed Dayan immortals were shocked and unbelievable. Even the rank 6 Dayan immortal, facing the encirclement of the 8 Dayan immortals, can only end up in hatred, and the immortal body can't survive at all. But at the moment, this fairy evolving like a monster has refreshed their understanding. Facing the combined attack of the 8 Dayan immortals, only spit out a mouthful of blood? Even the fairy body is not damaged at all? What is this fairy body made of? It was the leader Dayanxian who discovered the problem first, and he noticed the flashing blue mantle armor on Jian Wushuang's body. Then he drank in a low voice. Back. The 8 Dayanxians retreated instantly. It's late. Jian Wushuang roared. In addition to the violent power brought to him by the way of killing, he was also bloodthirsty and warlike. The kind of belligerence is beyond imagination, even reaching the point where life is exchanged for life. Facing the 8 Dian immortals, instead of retreating and fleeing, he directly confronted them. Among them, the great Yinxian closest to Jian Wushuang, even just released the Yanli barrier, was broken with a punch. When he reacted, his fist had already pierced a big hole in his chest. Do not. Hypo Dian was horrified, trying to cover his broken chest with his hands, but found that everything had been in vain. Xian Yuan was blasted to pieces, Jian Wushuang was like throwing rubbish, and he threw it into the void, and then his figure was almost at its extreme, and he completely rushed into Dangxian's camp. Facing such an unruly, but terrifying enemy, they were helpless. Above the chaotic sky, blood mist bursts from time to time, and the body shape of the 7 paths is constantly decreasing. 6 ways. 5 ways. 4 ways. Jian Wushuang seemed to be tireless, fighting back frantically, leaving the fairy body exposed outside the Jiutian Yixian full of cracks. He had more than 10 D-pin pills in his mouth, as if he was eating jelly beans. Once he couldn't hold it, he would swallow one and continue fighting. In the end, there were only 3 Dian immortals left in the chaotic sky. Of the 10 black-robed Dian immortals, only the last 3 were killed. This was an unimaginable scene. The head of the black-robed Dian's celestial eye is about to split, and at this moment, only revenge is left in his mind. This was a shameful scene, and the next moment he directly shook his arms, releasing a powerful force. Boy, I must kill you here today. Jian Wushuang sneered when he heard the words. This sentence is what I want to say. Today you have 1 count. Don't even try to escape from my hands. Then see who is right. The leader Dian exclaimed angrily. The next moment, Jian Wushuang took the lead, crushing them against them with endless killing. Do it, he shouted loudly. As his voice fell, the 2 Dian immortals behind him moved. The strength that was so strong that it could not be added suddenly swept out, directly tied to Jian Wushuang. Being caught off guard, he had a momentary pause. That is to say, under this pause, the headed Dian immortal moved, and layers of golden seals appeared on top of his head, and then kept pressing against Jian Wushuang. The golden seal of this level caused Jian Wushuang to suffer a bit, and now it is coming again, and the cover is pressed down. Down! The golden seal enveloped him, causing some pause in his movements. Hypo Dian Immortal was also at this time, breaking the golden seal, and releasing a thunderous blow. Numerous strands of golden light shot down like a long spear, covering Jian Wushuang completely. The black-robed Dian Immortal exudes a unique inch light, especially in the palm of his palm, flashing a deep inch light. The next moment, he quietly came to Jian Wushuang like a ghost, and then suddenly went into his chest with his fingers like a knife. Jian Wushuang's face instantly paled, and the palm of the black-robed Dian Immortal went through the 9 heavens Yishuan, violently gouging in. Divine blood spewed out, spilling into the void. Under the black hood, Hypo Dianxian showed a triumphant smile. He saw through the flaws of the treasure that Jian Wushuang was wearing. He tried desperately, but it succeeded. Opening his mouth to cough up a mouthful of divine blood, Jian Wushuang's complexion was extremely pale. He also did not expect that the hidden dangers left by his sword at the beginning would be used by others. In the last battle with Jiutian Xianjunchang dueling, Jian Wushuang realized his strongest sword. Yu reading www.akanshu.com, that is to say, using his strongest sword, tore open the Jiutian Xian on Chang Dueling's body, and finally shattered his fairy source. With the fall of Chang Dueling, he finally gave Jiutian Xian to Jian Wushuang. But the gap left by Jiutian Xian could no longer be made up, it was just a tiny wound. At the moment, he was seen through by the black-robed Dian Immortal, and gave a thunderous blow. Although Jian Wushuang did not have a source of immortality, he suffered the most trauma. And the black-robed Dian Immortal, who tore his entire palm apart from the immortal body, was also puzzled at this time. Chapter 49-38. 36,000 swords were intent at this moment, blasting out with his palm. Because the distance was so close, Dian couldn't avoid it at all, and all the sword intent was accepted by him. Zheng, the crisp and incomparable sword intent slashed him out, and the black-robed Dian immortal was like a kite with a broken line, and he fell into the void. And Jian Wushuang couldn't hold on anymore. His figure was like a shock, falling into the void. The old man, who barely stood upright on the ground, looked up and saw this scene, and his whole body was shocked. Then he jumped straight forward and caught Jian Wushuang, who had fallen. Seeing him, who was covered in blood and severely injured and dying, the old man gritted his teeth and placed him directly behind him. "Don't go, put him down." An angry sound resounded, and the only 3 remaining black-robed Dian immortals chased him. The old man stopped staying and ran wildly with Jian Wushuang on his back. As Dian immortal, his speed is extremely fast. Obviously, he has never escaped before. But the broken land still restricted his actions, and the old man seemed extremely afraid of the black water, and kept flying to avoid him. "Lao Yanghua, you are looking for death." Dian was furious to the extreme, reaching out his hand to lower the unmatched divine punishment. Unprepared, the old man was directly blown out, and his whole figure also fell into the black water. Jian Wushuang cried out in pain, and then passed out directly. The old man also desperately wanted to get out of the black water, but under the black water, a palm of both hands quietly clamped his legs, and then pulled it directly into the water. "Help, After a few bubbles in the black water, eventually everything was gone. The 3 black-robed Dian immortals chased them, and when they saw that there was no whereabouts, they couldn't help being furious. The black-robed Dian immortal, who was almost cut into a blood gourd by 36,000 sword intents, was furious to the extreme. "Look, dig the ground for me 3 feet and dig it out for me." Guru. Once under the black water, all the power seemed to have disappeared, and the old man carrying Jian Wushuang under the black water was throwing vigorously, but he couldn't rise at all. Jian Wushuang, who had fainted, was also extremely uncomfortable, frowning, and it seemed that he might fall at any time. If you look closely, you can find that in this extremely dark underwater, the old man's legs are clamped by a slender figure. The figure didn't seem to be afraid of the black water at all, swimming like a water ghost. His slender arms dragged the old man's legs and swam deep into the sea. The depths of the boundless sea is like a boundless black crystal, exuding an unspeakable magnificence and mystery. Just when the old man felt that his body was about to disappear, he clamped his body's shape and dragged him with a sudden flick. After a while, the old man was thrown onto a land. He was smashed into pieces, and at the same time an extremely pure and extremely powerful force entered his meridians, constantly moisturizing. The fragile mind was repaired, and the old man propped up and sat up dangling. "Where is this place? Everything in front of me is like some kind of magical cave. All kinds of spar condensed from the purest derivation crystal, exudes magnificent brilliance." At this moment, the slender figure that had been standing outside the entrance of the cave walked toward the cave. The old man immediately entered a state of alert. "Don't worry, I don't want to act on you. If I want to act on you, you would have disappeared into the sea just now." The figure's voice was lazy and deep, as if only waking up from a sleep. The hole was slightly bright, so that the old man could barely see him. The figure has long hands and long legs, and a well-proportioned figure. Although his face is not beautiful, it is free and unrestrained. On his chest is engraved with some mysterious flowing clouds and water patterns, with the reckless breath of ancient times. He came to the old man, then slowly squatted down. After looking at Jian Wushuang, who was lying on his back, who didn't know his life or death, he looked at the old man again, with some playfulness. "Do you want to carry him and change merit in front of that person?" The old man shuddered without a trace, and then said a little embarrassed, "You don't fart to me. Your eyes saw that I was going to do this?" He smiled, and didn't care about the abusive words in the old man's mouth. Instead, he stretched out his hand to Jian Wushuang, and said leisurely, "I've seen the battle just now from beginning to end. He is terrible, very powerful and easy. Only 3 of those law enforcement officers were left. But he has passed out now. If he is brought to that person at this time, I think the accumulated merits can set us all free. What do you mean? The old man looked at him nervously and asked. The young man with long hands and legs then said, the meaning is very simple. It is to bring him to the person and accumulate merits. Can you do it? Hearing this, the old man didn't rush to speak. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, I can't make a decision. He didn't kill me. Hearing this sentence, he raised his brows slightly. That's a good answer. If you agreed with me just now you are a corpse. The old man's figure was startled, his face also became cold. What do you mean? It's not interesting, we will leave here next. The long-legged young man shrugged and said, when he gets better, let's leave. Jian Wushuang felt his head tingle, as if it might burst at any time. His spiritual thoughts that had already reached perfection were all chaotic and turned upside down. The immortal body had already recovered, and the damage caused by the black-robed Dian immortal to Jian Wushuang was not fatal. What was really deadly was Jian Wushuang's own overdraft. The way of killing was too domineering, and it was extremely terrifying to consume his own power. But Jian Wushuang has been swallowing D-pin pills, calm to ensure the supply of the way of killing, which also caused his meridians to be overdrawn and depleted. Although he was constantly recovering, the feeling of overdraft in his mind still made Jian Wushuang in an extremely painful state. His temples were sweating like syrup, and even the power in the fairy's body was not controlled and flowed wantonly. This terrible feeling lasted for a long time, and when he got better, he immediately opened his eyes. In the eyes, it is a cave with mystery, and there was a strange face looking at him with a smile on his face. When Jian Wushuang woke up, the young man with long hands and legs smiled and said, congratulations on getting out of danger. You can call me Bian Ziyuan. Bian Ziyuan. A very unique name. Chapter 4939. A young man with long hands and long legs, named Bian Ziyuan, slowly got up and reached out his hand to the deepest part of the cave. We have been walking along the road ahead, and we can leave this sea area. Without answering him, Jian Wushuang strongly supported the ground and sat up. Although his complexion was still pale, the fairy body had recovered more than half. There is no goodwill for no reason. Although Jian Wushuang is still a little unclear about the current situation, he can still vaguely guess that the reason why he is here is inseparable from this young man named Bian Ziyuan. But being able to save him in front of those black-robed Dian immortals shouldn't have too many crooked minds. As if seeing the coldness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Bian Ziyuan didn't care but continued. This underwater cave was discovered by me at the beginning. It's extremely secretive. I'm afraid I'm the only one who knows the immortal, so please rest assured. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, and when he saw the old man squatting beside him, his eyes were surprised. You didn't go? The old man smiled bitterly. I saw that the adult was in trouble before, so I gritted my teeth and took you away. Who knows that the skills are not as good as people? And then I fell into the bottom of the sea. Thank you for your help. Jian Wushuang arched his hands. He hurriedly waved his hand. No, I'm still paying back my kindness, sir. Didn't you spare my life before? 1 yard goes to 1 yard, thanks a lot, Jian Wushuang replied. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan smiled slightly and said, you two hurry up. Let's leave here before they can react. It is the best policy. Jian Wushuang was still wary of this Bian Ziyuan, but the current situation was indeed as he said. He needed to leave as soon as possible. The karst cave formed at an unknown time. Its inner strength has been condensed into crystals, exuding magnificent brilliance. If this is not under the sea, I am afraid it will be a very good place. Bian Zi walked far in the front, was responsible for leading the way, and headed towards the deepest part of the cave. Out of caution, Jian Wushuang walked at the very end, always alert for possible changes. The karst cave was very long, and there was no abnormality. As Bian Ziyuan said, it seemed that besides him, there was no immortal in this karst cave. The more you move forward, the pure power begins to flow slowly. Not knowing whether it was intentional or unintentional, Bian Ziyuan began to approach Jian Wushuang and walked side by side. with some unconcealed curiosity in his eyes. Finally he said, "I wonder if I can ask name taboo?" Jian Wushuang glanced at him, then said, "Mist." "Misty? Yes, there is a hazy feeling." Bian Ziyuan said with a smile, "It is very similar to the name of an old friend of mine." He didn't answer. Jian Wushuang had already raised the highest vigilance in his heart for these Dian immortals, who were exiled in the Sea of No Edge. There was no exile for no reason, and it would be difficult to wipe out the resentment in their hearts after these endless years. "Brother Wu, I think you are very face-to-face. Is this the first time you came to Tianlu?" Bian Ziyuan asked softly while leading the way. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, "Yes, come to find a companion and don't stay here any longer." Bian Ziyuan pondered slightly. "Companion? I think the nearest outsider to Tianlu seems to be you. Brother Wu, I am afraid you will be disappointed." Jian Wushuang said, "That's okay, you can always find it." "That's not necessarily true." Bian Zi's face was slightly subtle. "Brother Wu, you have to know that this endless sea has endless edges, and its content is large enough to cover the universe, even if it is extremely easy for us to grow an immortal lost in this. So I think if you don't have a place to stay, you are likely to get lost in this endless sea." Jian Wushuang heard the words, nodded slightly and said, "Thank you for telling me, but I don't plan to stay here anymore." "Good luck then." Bian Ziyuan shrugged, then continued to lead the way. Due to the position, the old man gradually fell to the back of the team. At this time his expression was extremely anxious, as if waiting for something. This karst cave under the plane of heaven and land has grown to its extreme depth, and even though it is full of power, it still makes Jian Wushuang a little uncomfortable. He is ready to deal with changes and release his sword intent at any time. But nothing happened next, and the karst cave channel gradually moved upward without any change. When Bian Ziyuan opened the end of the passage, the hazy light beam from the outside shone in. "Brother Wu, it's safe now." Bian Ziyuan smiled. Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief, solemnly arched his hand, and then walked out. Stepping out of the karst cave channel, all you can see is the gray-white earth, without even the slightest cover. At this time, the old man who had not spoken quickly came to him, and said in a low voice and fast, "My lord, hurry up with me. I will take you out of here." Jian Wushuang heard this, although he was a little confused in his heart, but in the end he nodded. "Okay." The old man was overjoyed and hurried to lead the way. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan's lazy voice sounded. "Brother Wu, where are you going?" "Leave here," Jian Wushuang replied, and then turned to leave. "If you want to leave with that old man, I can only say that you are stupid. Since you are so stupid, it is better to leave your destiny to me." Bian Ziyuan's voice changed from lazy to cold. In the next moment, hundreds of millions of violent force burst out, covering the entire sky. Jian Wushuang's heart was tight, and he directly released the ancestral technique, the power world Tianmen, without thinking. But the majestic Tianmen just appeared, and it was knocked out by a giant palm covering the sky. At this moment, the original soft-eyed Bianzi was far away, and his body was full of majestic momentum, and the flowing clouds and water patterns on his chest were flowing slowly, full of general momentum that could not be seen directly. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn. Who could have imagined that this guy who looked extremely infamous and didn't even have a lot of power fluctuations was actually rank 6 Dian Immortal? An extremely mysterious light will emerge behind Bian Ziyuan. His eyes had become extremely dark, and the flowing clouds and water patterns on his body were undulating. The old man who saw this scene was shocked and sat down on the ground, terrified to the extreme. "Originally I planned to let you go, but instead of being killed by insidious crap, it's better to die in my hands," Bian Ziyuan said, stretched out his palm cover and pressed towards Jian Wushuang. Beneath the boundless sky, the sky fell sullenly, and a huge black palm that stretched for 1,000,000 feet came down. Facing the full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang was inevitable, and could only choose to face it. Fairy style, a little mountain and river reappear. A 7-planet galaxy flows slowly between his eyebrows. Chapter 4940. If Dian Immortal, even rank 3 Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang had the confidence to kill it, then facing rank 6 he had no chance of winning at all. The 6th rank is a watershed related to Dian Immortal. Once stepped into the 6th rank, it will be a complete transformation, condensing the light wheel of growth, and the strength is unimaginable. That's why Jian Wushuang was able to kill the rank 3 Dian Immortal, but when faced with the behemoth of rank 6 Dian Immortal, he ran away. Rank 6 Dian Immortal is a nightmare existence, but now he is unavoidable, and can only meet up. The fairy-style little mountains and rivers are called out, and the mountains and gods rise directly centered on Jian Wushuang. At the same time, violent Tianhe shot out from his palm, turning into a series of groundbreaking exercises, strangling away. The world was magnificent, and the most majestic blow broke out. The sacred mountain stands, the Tianhe River rushes, and the star sea flows, together constructing the fairy style of Jian Wushuang. The most magnificent slaying explosion completely burst, and the indescribable Huameng condensed at the center, like a million days shining in it, astonished to the extreme. I'm afraid that even Yanxian can't survive in the center of this martyrdom. Bianzi, who was standing in the void, saw this scene far away. Although his expression was calm, his eyes had been replaced by surprise. He could feel Jian Wushuang's terrifying trend that could be resisted by the chamber. And it was precisely because of this that he was surprised. Is there really such a terrible Yanxian? As early as Jian Wushuang's previous battle with 10 Hypo-Dian Immortals, Bian Ziyuan had completely witnessed the battle, so at this moment he did not think that Jian Wushuang would be determined. After releasing Geishan's palm, he only stayed for a moment, and then his figure disappeared. Unparalleled blasting the center, Jian Wushuang's figure did not receive too much blow. He quickly took out a D-pin pill and stuffed it into his mouth, preparing to fight for his life. Although there is no chance of winning against a rank 6 Dian Immortal, he is confident that he can escape even if he can't defeat it. The prosperous fairy-style Edian Shanhe directly offset Bian Ziyuan's blow, and just as Jian Wushuang was about to take the lead, a big crisis suddenly surged behind him. Jian Wushuang was horrified, and he didn't even want to break up and kick it out. The old man holding a dazzling force did not respond at all, and the hideous expression on his face was kicked out before he could even hide it. Divine blood spewed out, and the old man fell heavily to the ground. His chest collapsed. The fairy body of Dian Immortal could not resist Jian Wushuang's kick. With a mixture of fright and anger, Jian Wushuang was extremely furious. Why did you do this? After spitting out another mouthful of divine blood, the old man was so frightened that he backed away again and again. Jian Wushuang, who had already burst out his murderous intent, was ready to kill him directly. But at this moment, Bian Ziyuan appeared behind his back like a ghost, and then quietly pressed his palm against Jian Wushuang's back. In an instant, an unknown number of Yanli Huameng surged out, all bombarded. Jian Wushuang was inevitable, and his back completely took the blow. This terrible blow was heavier than the previous blow. Being so caught off guard, Jian Wushuang suddenly pours out a sip of blood, and his naked arms are directly shattered. Bian Ziyuan's attack was so terrible that Jian Wushuang instantly lost the ability to fight again. If it were not for the protection of Jishinaixuan, I am afraid his fairy body would be broken directly. Not dead yet. The corners of Bian Ziyuan's eyes trembled, but he didn't make any more moves, instead letting Jian Wushuang fall to the ground. Boom! He fell heavily on the ground, and the blood of the gods flowed out from the broken fairy body, and drops of blood fell on the gray-white ground, and was directly swallowed. At the same time, strips of gray-white tentacles rose from the ground, and then clung to Jian Wushuang's fairy body. These tentacles can swallow all the celestial bodies of the Dian Immortal, and are one of the main components for building heaven and land. Immediately afterwards, Bian Zi with an endless momentum fell in front of Jian Wushuang. He stomped his foot, and the tentacles that were supposed to swallow Jian Wushuang got into the ground one after another. Then Bian Zi slowly squatted down and looked at him with regret. It's a pity that a good seedling. I originally pitied you, but I had to cut you personally. It's a pity. Successfully attacked from behind, His eyes were full of pride and regret at the moment. But Jian Wushuang's naked arm outside Jiutian Yixian had been smashed. Unable to make any movements at all, he could only glare at Bian Ziyuan. Bian Ziyuan, who seemed to have lost his interest in beheading, slowly got up and looked at the sluggish old man on the side, with a touch of disgust in his eyes. "You scumbag! I have seen your impure disposition a long time ago, so you hide your murderous intent here," Bian Ziyuan said in disgust, raising his palm and preparing to blast the old man. At the same time, a loud sound of morning bell and evening drum broke the dead silence of Tianlu and spread throughout the 4 fields. Hearing the loud voice of Hongzhong Dalu, Bian Ziyuan retracted his palm, raised his head to look at the center of the sky, and then directly picked up Jian Wushuang and ran straight ahead. With the passage of time, the immortal body began to repair quickly, and Jian Wushuang's originally shattered limbs had grown back. And with Yanli tied his Bian Ziyuan, seeing this scene, his eyelids also jumped. Judging from the strength and resilience of the immortal body, this guy turned out to be an immortal? But Bian Ziyuan didn't think he was a fairy cultivator. After all, how could there be a fairy cultivator who could kill nearly 10-day cultivators with his own power? "It's best not to move, or I promise you won't survive to enter the imperial city," Bian Ziyuan warned solemnly. Jian Wushuang, who was trapped by Yanli, was still in a weak state and had no chance of winning in the face of him. So Jian Wushuang did not intend to do it. Pierced the sky, with the strength of the 6th-ranked Dian Immortal on the side, almost within a few breaths, reached the center of the entire heaven and land plane. It was a giant city, a magnificent and fortified giant city, but no giant city can radiate that kind of ethereal and majestic general trend. Only an imperial city can be described. On the entire heaven and land plane, there is only this building, which is extremely magnificent. After seeing this imperial city, Bian Ziyuan's face also became serious. Chapter 49-41. That kind of supreme majesty was so severe and cold that Jian Wushuang had some doubts about what actually lived here. The so-called imperial city can be crowned with the word emperor. Could there be an emperor living here? Jian Wushuang was a little surprised, but soon he denied himself. Even if Zhen Wuyang passed tyrant Zhu Wushuang, it shouldn't be possible to exile another emperor in this endless sea. You must know that Jian Wushuang was accompanied by the true shadow of the 3 emperors, and the emperor bodies that they had fought with Zhen Wuyang were shattered and were not captured. It can be seen that the emperor can be killed by another emperor, but he cannot be captured or banished. But when the 2 third-ranked Dian Immortals guarding outside the emperor gate called Bian Ziyuan the Great Heaven Official, they still made Jian Wushuang suspicious. The so-called Tianguan is a collective term for titles that exist in the line of emperors. Only the emperor and monarch can have the seat of heaven official. Take the line of Emperor Zhen Wuyang, who controls the entire Desai domain. There are 7 emperors under the seat of Zhenwuyang, and each emperor seat strictly has 1 big heaven official and 10 small heaven officials, and they cannot be exceeded. As for the seat of the emperor, there is only 1 great heaven official, and there are no restrictions on the small heaven official. And the importance of the seat of the great heaven official even surpassed the importance of a big companion who had grown up next to the emperor since childhood. In this way, it suffices to explain that once there are great heavenly officials and small heavenly officials, it means the emergence of the emperor's line. Because they only serve the emperor and the emperor, Bian Ziyuan is called the Great Heaven Official, which means that there is probably a line of emperors in this imperial city. Jian Wushuang thought this way. He couldn't help being a little serious. Soon, everything that came into view made him more solemn. I saw countless celestial bones piled up, forming an avenue to the sky, extending into the unknown mist. And at the end of the mist, a looming outline of a large but magnificent giant hall appeared. This scene was so shocking and awe-inspiring that Jian Wushuang began to believe that there must be some terrifying existence in it. Since your hands and feet have grown out, then go by yourself. I advise you to enter this imperial city, but don't think about how to escape, otherwise the bones under your feet will be your end. After retracting the Yanli chain on Jian Wushuang's immortal body, Bian Ziyuan coldly reminded him, then walked in the forefront and walked towards the giant hall. Jian Wushuang turned his wrist and glanced at him coldly, then looked around. This entire imperial city seemed to be shrouded in mysterious clouds, and there was an unreal feeling. It seemed that there was no other real thing besides the road of bones at the foot. After converging his mind, Jian Wushuang looked at the giant hall shrouded in the clouds and walked slowly. The White Bone Avenue totaled 99,900 feet. Until the last step, Jian Wushuang looked at the giant hall with a complicated expression. The White Bone Avenue behind him is 99,900 feet in total, each of which is made of immortal bones. And every immortal bone is the corpse of an immortal, without exception. In other words, just this White Bone Avenue was made up of countless corpses of immortals. What is the origin of this palace master? Who would do such a shocking thing? And there was another strange thing that made Jian Wushuang a little puzzled. There is a huge plaque in front of the giant hall in front of him, with 3 large characters engraved on the plaque. But these 3 big characters are weird to the extreme, because they can't be seen from any direction. Since they can't distinguish the shape, it's hard to understand the meaning. However, Jian Wushuang soon realized that the weird characters on the plaque were not deliberately written like this, but appeared to be the same as reflected in the mirror image. With this idea in mind, he quickly rehearsed it in his mind, and then fully understood it. The 3 weird characters on the plaque of the Sunran Giant Hall turned out to be reflected in mirror images. Jian Wushuang corrected it in his mind, and found that the 3 words were somewhat familiar. Ziyan Palace. Standing in front of the giant hall door, Bian Ziyuan turned his head faintly, glanced at Jian Wushuang who was still in a daze, and then waved his hand to push the hall door open. It was as if the gate of the palace that had been sealed in the dust for countless years was slowly opened, and a unique misty fragrance also floated out of the palace. Then, Bian Ziyuan wandered into the hall. As he entered, murmurs came from both sides of the gloomy hall. I have seen the great heaven official. Although Jian Wushuang didn't want to step into the palace very much, he was unavoidable and had to step into it. As he stepped in, the giant gate of the temple behind closed suddenly. The originally dim giant hall also lit up. On the mountain and sea pillars on both sides of the hall, nearly 100 sky lanterns slowly light up. As the sky lanterns light up, people in black robes began to walk out on both sides of the hall. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn, and each of these black-robed men approaching him had at least the strength of rank 3 Dayan Immortal. If once shot, I am afraid it will be extremely optimistic. Seeing the black-robed Dayan Immortals approaching in front of him, he was already secretly prepared to fight. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan stopped, turned around slowly, and said in a low voice, "Back!" With the falling of this voice, the black-robed Dayan Immortals who had surrounded Jian Wushuang in groups retreated like a tide. Looking at him again, Bian Ziyuan continued to walk deep into the giant hall. Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and after taking a look around the hidden crisis, he stopped staying and moved forward slowly. His Royal Highness, he and I have brought you. Bian Ziyuan stopped and bowed slightly, facing the dim depths of the temple. Immediately afterwards a faint voice with doubts sounded. "Ziyuan, are you here?" Soon, a somewhat thin figure walked out from the depths of the hall, walking in a hurry. "Ziyuan, is you?" The thin figure wore a gray dress. His face was like a crown, but he was extremely pale. After seeing the person, Bian Ziyuan nodded again. "Go back to your highness, it's me, he and I have brought you." This young man, called His Royal Highness, turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. For some reason, Jian Wushuang looked at him, always feeling inexplicably familiar. "It's him, a mere fairy who killed the 7 Dayan fairy under my seat?" The young man was a little bit incredulous. Bian Ziyuan then said, "His Royal Highness, yes, he was indeed the only one who killed Dayan Immortal across the border. But not only 7 but 11. "What? 11? The young man was shocked. "But he is obviously just a fairy." Bian Ziyuan's mouth also twitched when he heard that. Indeed, such a record on a Yanxian would be too unbelievable. Chapter 49-42. Since the beginning of ancient times, I have never heard of the fact that there is a Yin-Xian who can kill Dian-Xian across the border. The perception between the two is comparable to Yinghua and Haoyue. If it weren't for the scene that Bian Ziyuan saw with his own eyes, I am afraid that he would not believe it if he was killed. A small Zhao Yingxian not only crossed the border to kill Dian-Xian, but also killed 11 without stopping. Faced with the encirclement and suppression of 11 Dian immortals, I am afraid that even he himself could not do so easily. But the facts have happened, and he can't help but believe it. Bian Ziyuan even thought in his heart, once Jian Wushuang broke through Yin-Xian and climbed into the realm of Dian-Xian, what would it be like? Afterwards, he nodded slightly and said, His Royal Highness, it is true that all 11 Dian immortals died in his hands. Among them, the 6 black robe envoys under your seat also fell into his hands. The young man called His Royal Highness frowned and looked at Jian Wushuang solemnly. He was slightly uncomfortable looking at this kind of majestic gaze. The young man in front of him gave Jian Wushuang an inexplicable sense of familiarity, but he had no idea where this sense of familiarity came from. After a while he said in a cold voice, So, the 7 black robe envoys under my seat really fell into your hands? Jian Wushuang didn't conceal it either, and said calmly, Yes, but they are guilty of death. If I don't come to chase me, I don't need to be an enemy. Then do you know why they are enemies with you? Bian Ziyuan turned around and looked at him coldly. If you didn't intend to destroy Tianlu, how could they kill you? Jian Wushuang was a little dumb for a while. In the battle with the previous 4 Dian immortals, indeed the land under his feet could not withstand the attack and became fragmented. Later, Bian Ziyuan's voice eased. You have to know how difficult it is to establish a plane of heaven and land in this borderless sea. Above the borderless sea, everything in heaven and earth cannot float, and even Dian immortal cannot shuttle in the sea for a long time. And this is enough to explain the importance of the heaven and land plane. Once the heaven and the land are broken, all the big things here, there is no way for Yin-Xian to escape. Do you know how the land plane was formed this day? Bian Ziyuan came to Jian Wushuang and said softly, Every inch of this land is accumulated with the corpse of Yin-Xian. Jian Wushuang raised his brows slightly, and he had already secretly transported the strength in his palm. Well, Ziyuan, now I really want to see how he killed the 7 Dian immortals under my seat. The young man walked out of the darkness slowly and looked at him playfully. Then he waved his hand gently. Suddenly, 3 black robe envoys walked out from behind the mountains and sea pillars on both sides of the giant hall, blocking Jian Wushuang's path from behind. Let's get started. Only if you survive, you are qualified to continue talking. As his voice fell, the 3 black robes behind Jian Wushuang moved, and the endless momentum was revealed at this moment. 2 initial realms, 1 3-turn realm. In an instant, the Dian immortal, who was in the 3-turn realm, set off first, and his endless strength gathered from his palm, like the sharpest and unmatched blade, piercing Jian Wushuang's back. At this moment he also moved, but he didn't turn around, but the fairy leaned slightly and avoided the terrible blow. While evading, Jian Wushuang slammed a punch to his side with all his strength. With the blessing of the true shadow of selflessness, this punch exerted 10% of its power. The black robe envoy who missed a blow was caught off guard, and his entire side was completely hit by the punch. Boom! The huge force burst out. Where the black robe could eat this huge force, the whole fairy body flew out like a broken kite, and hit the mountain and sea pillar heavily. The mountains and sea pillars supporting the giant hall on each side are as thick as 100 feet encircled. An ordinary Yin-Xian might not be able to destroy it. Boom! The black robe made a heavy smash on a mountain and sea pillar, and countless cracks centered on him, instantly covering the entire pillar. I am afraid it will break directly in the next moment. Jian Wushuang didn't stop after slamming a 3-ranked Dian immortal into the air. He turned around and faced the other 2 black robe envoys who rushed forward. Unmatched strength burst in this giant hall. A gust of wind swept through, shaking the entire giant hall. Seeing the figure that fought fiercely with the 3 Dian immortals, and did not lose the wind, the young man and Bian Ziyuan were completely shocked at this moment. This scene is really astonishing. You must know that immortal Yen is not a plaything in Dian Immortal's hands, and can be killed almost at will. There is no possibility of fighting with each other. But the appearance of Jian Wushuang broke their inherent cognition. It turns out that Yin Xian can kill Dian Xian across the border. 36,000 sword intent rose from the body, protecting Jian Wushuang from being attacked. With the blessing of the true shadow of Wu Self, he has no fear of the Dian Immortal in the two initial realms. And even the three-turn Dian Immortal behind him is not in his eyes. Because the Dian Immortal in this borderless sea is more or less weakened, which is why Jian Wushuang dared to give it a go. With heavy punches, a slightly shorter Dian Immortal was inevitable, and was hit by the front. In an instant, his chest collapsed directly, and the entire fairy body folded strangely from the middle, and then flew out like a cannonball, hitting the mountain and sea pillar. Boom! The entire mountain and sea pillar seemed to be unable to withstand the tremendous force, and broke directly from the middle. The giant hall shook, and it seemed that a corner of the hall was almost torn apart. After severely injuring a black robe envoy, Jian Wushuang's whole body pressure was reduced, and the battle was completely released. Although he completely let go of his hands and feet, he did not kill him. In this giant palace, Yu reading www.ifakanshu.com kills Dian Immortal under his seat one by one in front of the master in the temple. I am afraid it will be really impossible to be kind. The giant hall was shaking, and the unparalleled strength burst open. With Jian Wushuang as the center, a series of fine cracks emerged from the feet, and then gradually spread. The two black robes kept flying out, then climbed up from the ground and fought again. The mountains and sea pillars were smashed by huge force, and there was already a mess in the center of the temple. The young man watching this scene had already twitched his eyes. Bian Ziyuan also turned from the initial shock to helplessness. He turned to look at the young man and said, "His Royal Highness, don't let them fight anymore, otherwise your heavenly palace should collapse." "Quick stop," the young man finally said. Bian Ziyuan, who received the order, nodded, then took a step forward, and stretched out his hand to wave freely. In an instant, there was endless exquisite mist falling. Chapter 49-43. As this exquisite mist fell, frost also followed, and the battlefield in the giant hall was frozen. Jian Wushuang, who was fighting fiercely with the two Dian Immortals, felt that the temperature all over his body dropped sharply, as if he had fallen into an endless cave, and the forest was extremely cold. And the two Dian Immortals who flew into the air were also directly frozen in the air at this moment. Jian Wushuang couldn't hold back his strength and slammed out. The two Dian Immortals that were enclosed by ice were directly blasted into countless ice crystals and scattered all over the ground. Ding, ding, ding. The crisp ice crystal fell, and the giant hall fell into dead silence again. Of the three Dian Immortals who fought against each other, there was only one left at this moment, and he did not know his life or death. Throwing the ice crystal off his palm, Jian Wushuang calmly looked at Bian Ziyuan. Bian Ziyuan's eyes were cold, and he stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "Are you looking for death?" He didn't speak, and between his palms, an invisible sword was condensed. The originally silent hall was instantly filled with a sense of killing. "Do you think you are my opponent?" Bianzi took a step forward. An endless stream of clouds and water patterns appeared, and at the same time a light wheel appeared from behind him. Just as the battle was over, the young man spoke with a low voice. "My heavenly palace is not the place where you do your hands, so give me a little restraint. Otherwise, the cornerstone of this heavenly palace, you will use your fairy body to cushion it." Hearing the words, Bian Ziyuan withdrew an unprecedentedly powerful force and retreated behind him. Jian Wushuang also scattered the sword in his hand and looked at the young man walking towards him and said, "I'm sorry for the fact today. I left on my own, and will never step here again." "Leave. Just leave like this. You killed nearly 10 black robe envoys under my seat. How do we calculate this account?" The young man looked at him with a faint smile and said, "Do you think I will let you go easily? What do you want to do?" Jian Wushuang looked at him. He smiled slightly. "What I want is simple. It's just a transaction, even if you pay me back. Hearing these words, Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. What he disliked the most was this kind of transaction. He felt the discomfort of being controlled by others. You only have this option. The young man pointed a finger at him. As his voice fell, black robe envoys began to walk out in the dark on both sides of the giant hall. After pondering for a moment, Jian Wushuang said in a cold voice, "What deal? This transaction is very simple, but you need to leave a place alive before I can tell you the terms of the transaction." The young man walked slowly to Jian Wushuang's face and said with a smile. Jian Wushuang felt a great crisis inexplicably, but it was too late. A total of 40 black robe envoys released their respective powers at this moment and blasted on the floor of the hall. In an instant, as if opening a huge dust-sealed door, blood-red ripples appeared on the entire floor. "Good luck." The young man smiled weirdly and pushed him down after reaching out. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He wanted to resist, but the giant hall behind him had become an endless sea of blood. One blood palm grabbed him, and then dragged it directly into the blood sea, disappearing. The blood wave rolled, and everything was calm again. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan came to the young man's side and asked, "His Royal Highness, are you planning to put all hope on him? Do you have any other way?" He carried his hands on his back, as if thinking about something. "He gave me a very different feeling. I have a hunch that if we can leave this endless sea, we will be with him. There is a big relationship." "I hope so. The time we have been trapped here is too long." Bian Ziyuan sighed softly, looking at the surging sea of blood. What if he can't survive this blood test? Then let him die in it. This sea of blood was originally made up of Wangxian's bones. There is no more than one, and a lot less. Wow! In his ears was the sound of water flowing like a clear spring, and Jian Wushuang woke up almost when he was plunged into this sea of blood. He directly condensed the invisible sword, and then cut off all the blood arms that were entwined with the immortal body. Looking into the eyes, everything is pure blood red. Unlike the endless sea of blood in the Sand Demon Cavern, this sea of blood does not have the kind of cold and dead air, and the vicious coldness, but is full of forbidden auras. This kind of restriction is very weird, full of the aura of ancient precipitation, and gives people a sense of unknown severity. Swinging a sword to cut away the hands entwined with him, Jian Wushuang let the fairy slowly fall. He could feel that there was only boundless death, and there was no other threat. Where is this place, and why does it give me a feeling of forbidden land? Jian Wushuang recalled in his mind, while looking at everything in front of him. Soon, his figure sank into the deepest part of the sea of blood. What surprised him was that the depths of this sea of blood turned out to be land. It is indeed land, only land paved with bones. The broken fairy bodies have long been turned into piles of bones, stacked on top of everything, forming a boundless land of bones. Standing under this sea of blood, Jian Wushuang watched this scene with a little shock, but he was also a little shocked because of his firm mind. How many immortals need to fall before they can pile up this boneless earth? This is a confined space under the sea of blood. There is an endless sea of blood above his head, and a boundless earth of bones under his feet. Beneath the infinite, only he was alone, lonely to the extreme. Why would you throw me under the sea of blood? After converging his mind, Jian Wushuang began to think about this question. This sea of blood is endless, full of the breath of ancient prohibition, like an ancient battlefield left by one party, rather than a prisoner's execution ground. Could it be that he intends to give me some chance here? He thought of various possibilities again. And at this moment, following the sobbing of the cold and long wind, a cold and charming voice quietly sounded behind Jian Wushuang. "Wushuang, look back and see who I am." Jian Wushuang suddenly turned around, only to see a figure wearing a black gold-pleated skirt. That is a woman. A black and gold-pleated skirt made her figure set against the luxury and coldness to the extreme. They were no more than a few feet apart, and they could clearly see their faces. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed unconsciously, and his heartbeat speeded up a bit. Facing such a mysterious woman, he always felt a certain kind of shackles in his heart. Since the first encounter in the first great voyage, they have only hurriedly counted. Chapter 49-44. Although they only hurriedly counted the faces, they could always meet in unexpected places, as if they were destined to never leave. The long wind blew her long hair, and even the black and gold pleated skirt was blowing, like black and gold flowers in full bloom, making her impossible to see. Above this boneless earth, she is the only one who is alone. Withered and cold, yet clear and beautiful. She is Zheng. The long hair was blown away by the long wind, and then she took out a golden hairpin from her waist and coiled the scattered long hair behind her. A pair of Yingmu with a unique charm, as if full of autumn water, fixedly looking at Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Jian Wushuang didn't even evade that kind of gaze, but for some reason, he couldn't avoid it, so he could only look at her. She is truly stunning, but she carries an indescribable danger. After the two looked at each other for a while, Zheng Ying walked towards him slowly. Jian Wushuang wanted to retreat, but found that the movement was a little unnatural. "Go ahead, why are you here?" She had a very unfriendly tone and questioned him. Listening to this familiar tone, Jian Wushuang began to be a little confused. Are you really Zheng Ying? It's not my illusion. Answer my question first." Zheng Ying's tone is beyond doubt, her stunning cheeks faintly angry. Jian Wushuang was helpless and finally compromised. "Well, I came here mainly because I wanted to find Diqing, and he was banished here." Then he told Zheng Ying about everything that happened before. After hearing all this, Zheng Ying's sword brows frowned slightly. "Stupid, just for his own sake, just venture here alone? Do you know where this is? Don't you be afraid of dying here?" Jian Wushuang immediately said, "I have 90% confidence that I can find the truth and leave here with him. But if I do not happen to fall here, then I can only recognize it." "Stupid! Then do you know that I am the catastrophe you are facing now?" Zheng Ying said coldly as he looked at him, and then suddenly drew a sharp soft sword from the jade belt around his waist. The tip of the sword reached his throat. Jian Wushuang didn't do anything, and he didn't even release Yanli. He could feel that Zheng Ying had no intention to kill, and he didn't even release Yanli. "Are you the real Zheng Ying or the fake Zheng Ying?" He was completely puzzled, and began to fall into doubt. Zheng Ying retracted his soft sword and said coldly, "Of course I am a fake." Jian Wushuang did not expect that she would answer so simply. Withdrawing the soft sword, Zheng Ying continued to say coldly, "Remember every word I said here. You don't believe in any immortal, just make a path. Don't believe anyone who tells you anything." Hearing this, he pondered for a moment, then asked uncertainly, "Then what you said, should I believe it?" Zheng Ying was silent and finally said, "Don't let me smoke you." After speaking these last words, she turned and left. "Remember every word I say. It can support you to live here." Zheng Ying's figure finally dissipated before Jian Wushuang's eyes, as if nothing had ever appeared. But Jian Wushuang knew that she had indeed been here. Strange. Why does she know where I am every time? Jian Wushuang touched his chin with some doubts. At this point, he has determined that it is indeed Zheng Ying himself. Although every time she appears, she is a little too unbelievable. Retaining his mind, Jian Wushuang thought about what Zheng Ying had conveyed in his heart, and then decided to set off. This white bone land under the sea of blood has been extending endlessly. He guessed that if he wanted to leave here, he could only keep moving forward. If this is the case, then break a path. Jian Wushuang's eyes became sharp at this moment, and the entire fairy body was like a real sword hidden from the front. It seemed that as his mind turned, the deadly bone earth began to shake. Like boiling, the broken bones began to recover. The breath of the supreme fairy. A dilapidated fairy bone lifted up the sword. It seemed to be attracted by the aura exuding from Jian Wushuang's body. Two groups of dying black light surged in the eye sockets. Hungry, it suddenly raised the broken real sword in its hand and rushed towards it as if it went crazy. Jian Wushuang shook his head helplessly. The next moment, an invisible sword condensed in his hand. Facing the army of bones that gradually gathered in front of him, he released the most severe blow. Wushuang Kendo, Zingehohejianyini, the first style. Star. An unremarkable straight cut fell, like dropping a stone in the lake. Boom! The endless trend bursts completely at this moment. Millions of sword intents have risen from the sky. Each of them is the peak sword intent. With the surge of millions of sword intent, thousands of on pillars also exploded. The bones of the earth quaked, as if they were torn apart. The army of bones that was running wild, under this sword, was directly broken into powder. 100,000 bones, 1,000,000 sword intent. The mountains and seas will fall, and the heavens are trembling under this sword. Countless bones shattered into dust and returned to the earth again. A figure, stepping on countless bones, with 1,000,000 sword intent, moving forward firmly. At the same time, in the giant palace of Tianlu, the young man standing in front of the sea of blood and Bianzi far. After seeing this shocking scene, the corner of their eyes jumped fiercely, especially Jian Wushuang, carrying 1,000,000 sword intent, and easily strangling the army of bones, is a scene of refreshing cognition. After a long while, the young man took a deep breath and said, "What is the origin of this guy? How could it be Yanxian?" Bian Ziyuan shook his head. "I don't know much about him. I'm afraid I don't know his origin without Yanxian. He is very mysterious. For him, this assessment will probably be completed soon." The young man shook his head and said, "Done? I am afraid it is impossible to complete. Under this blood sea, there is still an existence comparable to an emperor. Do you want him to get that person's inheritance?" Bian Ziyuan looked a little solemn. "This is not something I think he can get. No one knows what that person means. My only hope now is that he can come out alive." The young man said, "Perhaps when he walks out, it is the time we know when we can leave here." Crack! The last sound of sword cutting fell, and there was no other fairy bone to stand before Jian Wufang. These fairy bones, which have been lost for so many years, are already fragile to the extreme, and they are not climate at all. If the ordinary Dian immortal entered this place, he might hate it, but Jian Wushuang is different. These immortal bones can't even cause any effective damage to him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.